fellow HCLites, but also for our community, also for our nation.
As we work through these uncertain times of COVID-19, I take pride in the fact that I work for an organization who makes it clear that its priorities are its people, its clients, and then being a good global citizen. And HCL really, with one HCL, encapsulates all of this.
And we're coming out stronger as true communities. One HCL means we are all in this together.
We are one HCL, divided by geographies, but united by networking. We cope with COVID-19 efficiently and build our team and start working from home.
Showing all the stories of our HCL employees who have come an extra mile to support their projects, to support their teams, and to support the society. Really hats off to all of them, and really thanks to HCL for bringing all these stories into the limelight, so that these stories will inspire others, and they will make many more champions.
Good evening, Mr. Pankaj. Hello, Rajan.
Hi.
It's Richard.
Hey, Richard.
How are you, man?
How are you? How are you? Can you hear me?
I can now, yeah. Everything well?
Oh, everything okay. How is Hong Kong?
Oh, Hong Kong. I tell you, I'm so fortunate to be here.
I can hear you.
Good evening, speakers. I'm Vinod from CII, from the support team.
Fair enough.
Good evening, sir.
Hi.
So we will start the session in a few minutes, sir. We are already live on YouTube, so the attendees will be viewing the session on YouTube side. And if there are any questions, they will directly post it to us, or post it to you, sir, after the session.
Sure. Thank you. Hi, Pankaj. Can you hear us? Can you hear me, Pankaj?
I can hear you, Rajan.
Okay, so I think there's something. Maybe Pankaj has an issue.
Looks like he's on mute.
Maybe he can't hear us. That's what it looks like.
No.
Mr. Pankaj, can you hear us? Mr. Pankaj, we can hear you now.
Yes, please. There is some problem. So I've connected from the computer, from the mobile phone, the good old mobile phone.
Okay, fine.
So I can
Hi,
see
Pankaj.
Rajan, yeah, I can see Rajan and hi, Richard. Everything good?
Oh, good, thanks. Yeah,
Hi,
I have
Rajan.
nothing to complain about.
So you've been in Hong Kong for the last 6 months?
Yeah, since February. This must be the longest period in the last 20 years when I've not been on a flight.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think we can. Rajan, कहाँ रहे हो यार? गायब रहे हो बिल्कुल. Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Yes.
Oh yeah. I'm in US.
Okay.
I
A little early,
I mean,
right?
oh yeah, it's a bit early, but that's fine. That's okay.
Yeah.
I had to invert my calendar a little bit anyways.
I think we can start now. So I think what I'll do is Saurabh's father, the joint secretary's father, had an eye operation today at the same time. So he's, sent his apologies that he cannot join. Obviously, we wish his father all the best.
Sir, excuse me, sir. Vinod here from support team, sir.
Yes.
Sir, Mr. Rahul Sharma is also not able to join due to some sudden engagements, actually. So we
Yes.
can start exactly before 30, sir.
Yes,
The
we are.
participants are viewing the session on YouTube, sir. That
Yes.
as a live stream.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. You may start, sir. Yes. Thank you.
I think we'll just start. So I think it's wonderful to have you guys here. And Richard, I'll start with you first, with your tremendous experience of this large scale manufacturing operations. Uh, what are your thoughts? And what have been the challenges? I'm sure you've had your share of challenges. Uh, and what is your understanding of Atmanirbharta? What does India have in mind, when we are saying Atmanirbharta? What does it mean? In your understanding, what does it mean?
Sure. Well, first of all, it's tremendous to get the opportunity to talk with you and others on the WebEx who are listening in. So thanks for the invitation. You asked about running large operations and our experience. I think the best way that I can address that question is to talk about a little bit about the history that Flex has had in India, because the experience has definitely changed over the years. We've been in India since 2001, and to be frank with you, the first few years were difficult. We had a large facility down in Tamil Nadu, which for a lot of the period in the first, let's say, 10 years or so was significantly underutilized. And there was a lot of questions about why had we made investment to come into India. We hit a point, I'm going to say 5 or 6 years ago, where things started to change significantly. And I think it coincides with the launch in Make in India. Pretty much within weeks of that policy being announced by the Government of India, we were getting calls from all of the major international mobile phone companies looking for capacity. We obviously embraced that. We mobilized a large group of people to bring the expertise in, because at that point, we were still a fairly immature operation, even though we'd been in the country at that point for something like 15 years. And that really was the springboard for our growth. And we've gone through, over the last 5 years, significant growth. And I attribute a great deal of that growth to what the Government of India did around making India. Now, the other thing that we've seen, which has been really significant, is the ease of doing business. When I think back to when I first started coming into India and being involved in the operations there, to be frank and open, it was difficult. It was difficult to engage at a local level, difficult to engage at a national level. But what we've seen over the last 5 years or so is a lot more willingness for the government at each level to engage with industry, to understand the types of challenges we have, and then to partner with us to find solutions. So I would say where we're at now is, I don't think we're done by any means. I think we've still got a great journey ahead of us, but we've got to a point where we have a critical mass of an operation. That's enabled us to bring in more people at every level, including some very talented engineers and manufacturing professionals, backed up by some high volume business that we have. And we're looking to go to the next level. But I feel that when I compare where we were at, let me say 10 years ago, and where we are now, it's unrecognizable in terms of how easy it is to do business, and actually how how many questions we get from our customers about how India can be a manufacturing location for their products. And I'm talking about both domestic customers and also international customers. So I'm feeling really good at the moment about where we're at. I mean, obviously, at the moment, we've got some challenges. I mean, the whole world has got challenges associated with COVID, but I'm sure we'll get past that. And as soon as we do, we're just ready to go and expand further. And I feel super confident at the moment that the development that's been made over the past few years positions us well for growth. For sure, there's still room for further improvement, but the attitude and the mindset that we encounter from the government, from organisations like yours, Pankaj, and across the board, almost sets the groundwork in a way where, unless we do something really really silly, we have to succeed. So I'm super confident about this. I really am. Now you're on mute, Pankaj.
Your understanding of Atmanirbhar. I'll just get Rajan in now for his opening comments. Rajan, what is going on in the world? You see this NVIDIA's purchase of ARM, and you know what is happening with the semiconductor world and so on. So you are at the absolute core of technology, and you know you are one of the most significant players in the smartphone ecosystem. So first, give us some gyan on what is going on. What are the global currents at the moment? Because that my next leading question will be about how do they impact the vision of Atmanirbharta.
Thank you, Pankaj. What we see is that while the pandemic is on, and every country has, in some or the other way, managed to live with the situation and deal with it, I believe that humanity as a whole has managed to survive this. And we're seeing a lot of that dynamics and the resilience that was always there in the humanity. And this resilience goes beyond humanity to even companies. And they have stood up to this. The good thing which I see, what helped us all, even in this time, irrespective of which country was it, was the availability of technology. And if for a second, if you had to think about if there wasn't all of this technology available to us, how on earth would we have just managed to even try to fight this out? Our lives have changed, and meaningfully changed, I would say, which we had never planned for. So when something as unplanned as what happens like this, there has to be some, I would say, some third force or some force which was coming to help us. And I see that big force which came to help us all was technology. Our life, we operate out of our homes, our offices, and just to give you an idea that the Qualcomm base in India and the Qualcomm base globally, we are around 30, give and take around a few thousand. We are around 37,000 employees. And overnight, we all actually started working from home. And you can imagine that when all what we were never technically designed to operate like, but we started operating. And I'm sure this is the case with most companies who are not, of course, in manufacturing, but we are probably an R&D company, and we went and operated out of homes. And let me tell you, even with this sort of situation, there was nothing which actually stopped. There was no innovation which stopped. There is not a single deadline we did not meet. So I would say this story is true not just for Qualcomm, it's probably true for every other company. And all what the telecom world has done in the field of technology is primarily up visible to all of us. And we're happy to say that companies like Qualcomm, which are fundamental to that technology, we are glad that all of that technology, whether it was India or there was any other market, we weren't distinguished. India stood up to exactly the same way and managed the same way as probably any other market would have managed, which shows that fundamentally the design of India was very solid. The very infrastructure was very solid. We can keep cribbing about it, we can keep crying about it. Of course, there are areas of improvement, but what I see this is that for once it was like more like an equalizing force, and it almost integrated the world. We companies who have massive bases in India, we were contributing to the global R&D. We never let anything hamper that global delivery. So I'm glad that it sometimes happens that you don't realize what you have till actually situations demand that they are visible and come to your aid. So I think that's where technology globally has helped, I would say, in this situation. It may not be the best of the situation. We all would want to see that it ends, but it has set a new ground of what and paved a new actually direction for all what is going to come, and the more and the extra reliance on technology that we will depend on as we go ahead and come out of the situation.
Very excellent. The very motivating, and every time you hear this, that how the digital industry has helped the world stay up, it's very motivating
That's
and
right.
gratifying that one is a part of that. It's been very challenging, but it's been. I think we've somehow managed. I wish the manufacturing guys could have the same luxury. They are the challenge of fighting the pandemic and seeing that people are on the shop floor. It's been excruciating. And Richard, what has been that experience? How well has India coped with it?
Well, before I answer that question, Pankaj, let me just come back a little bit on what Rajan was saying, because in addition to the manufacturing operations we have in India, Flex has also got 5,000 people in shared services centres. We have a large centre in Chennai, along with one in Pune. Pretty much from day one after the lockdowns were announced in April, we've been running our shared services centres at in excess of 98%. And I'll call it sacrifice that our people have made, because it's not comfortable to be working at home for such a long period of time. But it's been critical to our operation, not just in India, but our back office operation in India supports our 100 sites globally. They haven't missed a beat. So I completely agree with what Rajan was saying. Without technology, that would have been impossible. But also without the resilience and the adaptability of our employees, that wouldn't have been possible. So, I mean, I think India stood up tremendously well, and the attitude of the people can only be commended around how, from a sort of office standpoint, people have adapted. Now to your question about manufacturing. Well, it's been tough. I'll be honest with you. I mean, we've been through various levels of restriction in terms of the number of people we can bring back. I mean, we globally have had a policy that our number one priority was always going to be the health and welfare of our people. Now, in a way, we were a little fortunate because we have large operations in China, and China encountered COVID before India did. So back in Chinese New Year, again, fortunately, that was when it hit in China, we had a week or so to prepare. And we wrote a playbook, and we defined processes, which over the following months, we've rolled out globally. So what we're doing in India at the moment is based on a playbook that exists for Flex in all the 30 countries that we operate in worldwide. But it is actually very basic. I mean, it comes down to, number one, following local regulations, which, to be frank with you, have changed quite a few times in India. So we've had to adapt to that, whether it be to do with the movement of people into the facilities, the number of people we can have in the facilities. But that's a minor point. The key issues have been around social distancing. So we've had to reduce our capacity in certain areas to ensure that people are not too close to each other. We've had some really rigid processes around the use of face masks, sanitation throughout the operation, not just on the shop floor, but in the locker rooms, in the restrooms, in the cafeterias throughout. And whereas I think our people have been super disciplined in following those procedures, I think there's a human tendency that if if you're not careful, people will start to relax. And so the task that we're faced with at the moment is communication, continuing to reinforce the message that if you follow some very simple processes around distancing, sanitation, face masks, and avoiding crowds, you can actually keep yourself safe. And to be frank, I think our facilities down in the southeast are pretty safe places to be at the moment because of those processes. But it has impacted us. It impacts our efficiency because we have capacity that is not fully utilized. We have issues with absenteeism because for sure some people can't get into work. We've had to adapt many of the approaches that we've taken, for example, for our office workers, not just in our shared services centers, but also in our manufacturing facilities. And we've done that in many cases deliberately to reduce the number of people that we have in our factories. So we're getting by, and I think we're doing quite well at the moment. But the key moving forward is just vigilance. We've just got to be really careful that people are behaving in the right way at the sites and following the rules that we've set. And we'll get through this.
Now let's come to the core issue of Atmanirbhar, and I'm addressing both of you at this. You know, Indian mobile phone industry is now, the import of CBUs is very tiny now, just under $1 billion, and we've already done manufacturing of 2,15,000 crores, and we are already exporting 27,000 crores. So does Atmanirbharta self-reliance actually resonate with the smartphone industry? Is it about import substitution, further import substitution of components, or is it something else which, you know, is not clear to a lot of people? So hearing it from both of you will be very enlightening. Rajan, you go ahead first.
I think it's probably in the 30 years I have seen in this country, Pankaj, probably there hasn't been any other time which can be equated to the time today. We all wanted India to be self-reliant, Atmanirbhar, in terms of our own needs, at least to cater to start with. What probably we have achieved here is something beyond that, because now we are talking about exports and sizable exports. But as we look at the whole canvas, this is a part of the whole story. And I would say the first major step has been taken in that direction. And generally, it's the very first step, which is the most difficult and the most critical one. With all the policies in the environment the government has created today, cannot be parallel to any other times. And their focus, their support, their openness has actually helped industry to step forward and take bigger bets. And that's why you see, and I think organizations like yours have all supported a very cohesive environment for people to come and set up and expand their capabilities here in India. Having said that, I would say what we need to still do is absolutely go beyond manufacturing. And that's what is happening. The PLI scheme, which the government launched, is a pretty visionary scheme. We have been some forms of it in parts. I've seen it in my career in the past, but never have I seen something so well structured, so well formulated, and which is actually creating the base for the next level going beyond manufacturing. So the phase manufacturing program of the government was a very, very right approach, backed up by the schemes like the PLI, is now going to see a lot of the second phase, I would say, in the history, or rather, sorry, in the career of mobile phone is going to come now with components coming into India. And that, I think, is a big step. It's not going to be easy, but with the scale that India offers, and as the very right first step was also to back up exports. So sometimes when we look at China and we track China, we typically see China market as two parts. One was China domestic and China exports. I think we aren't far off when India will also be looked upon as India domestic and India exports. Being the largest market and the only growing market for smartphones in the world, I would say, of course, save some other countries which are also growing, but in terms of the size, we continue to grow over the next few years. If we minus out the current pandemic time where we took a bit of a dip. So this market is huge for even somebody to come and work for to satisfy the same the market, India market itself. And now you top it up with exports. It actually is a massive advantage to the scale which it offers, to the scale in terms of the scale it offers. So that would be the second phase where the component manufacturing, which has started in some way. There are a lot of companies who have come up, there are a lot who have registered also for the PLI. And these are complex components. So they are not going to be some simple ones. So we are going beyond just making the chargers or even packaging the batteries. So we are going to the next deeper level. So I think we are there. We have started it, and I think we have to cross a path there. The third element of being Atmanirbhar would be R&D. And that in every form is existing, and nobody is not, like I would say, the world is aware of the capabilities of India in terms of the software capabilities. And the part which is missing is the hardware capabilities of design. And that's where I think, that's where we would say we have yet a lot of work to do. Companies like Qualcomm have been in India for the last 26 years. And we are almost there till from the time almost the liberalization of the relicensing happened somewhere in 1991. We came in a few years after that. So with 26 years of history in India, where we have a massive engineering base, which is doing nothing but cutting edge research and development along with our headquarters, which is in San Diego. I think there's no doubt that the capability does not exist even in that part of design, which is more like an ASIC design or a hardware design. So I would say that is something which I see coming up, but we'll have to work more on it. And then I would underlay one stream which is very important are the startups. I think this country has shown the whole world that probably the next revolution in terms of innovations are going to come out of this country through these startups. So essentially, as I said, we break it up in manufacturing and then moving on to essentially component manufacturing, and then go to R&D, and then the underlying is the startups which are going to aid in terms of those innovations that are required by our market. I think the next 10 years is going to be something which will change not just India and position India to be the next big hub, but also probably, I would say, it's going to make the world realize that what the potent power of India.
Wonderful. Richard, what is your understanding of Atmanirbharta? What the hell is India trying to do with so much of manufacturing already happening here? Imports are at a trickle now. So what is your understanding of this concept?
Well, I think I want to pick up on a point that Rajan was making about component manufacturing, because when I step back and look at the manufacturing that currently takes place in India, which is extensive, as you say, and I compare it to other countries across Southeast Asia, there's one key piece that's missing, and that's the extensive supply chain ecosystem around components. And the way I see it, if you think about assembly comes and goes because the level of investment that you need to make and arguably the level of expertise that you need is lower than if, for example, you're making injection moldings or electronic components or metal stamp parts. And I think what India really needs to put a focus on, which I know PLI is addressing, is how can the supply chain and supplier ecosystem for components be built out to cut down, as you rightly say, on the large number of, or the large volume of material that's being imported to the country. So if you think back to what happened with Making India back in, what was it, 2015, a lot of the mobile phone companies saw the quickest route into the India market to import kits of material and have them assembled in India. And sure enough, that worked for assembly. PLI for sure takes a step towards the component ecosystem, but that's where I think India needs to double down. Any future policies or initiatives around incentives really needs to look at that component area. And then the second point I'll make is, I think PLI, although we didn't join it, has been well received for mobile phones. But the next question, I know it's on the agenda, but the next question is, where do we go next? I mean, in some ways, I feel that there's a preoccupation with mobiles, which is fine because everyone's got one and they're everywhere in today's world. But there's many other products which I think India needs to address and see how similar schemes to PLI can be introduced to grow in other areas around electronics. And I'm thinking, for example, in industrial products in particular, because I think that's an area where there's a massive opportunity in India, but you need to provide that stimulus or that incentive for companies to jump in. So the way I'm seeing it is PLI broaden it in other strategic areas, and then go deeper in terms of component ecosystems so that we can get a better established supply chain. Because the single most common question that I get asked when I'm talking to customers about coming to India is, how can you locally source material? And we've been fairly successful at doing that. But at the same time, I still see the limitations between what we can do in India versus what, for example, we could do in Malaysia. And that needs to be addressed, because I'll be very happy when our customers stop asking that question. But it's a perception that India at the moment is assembly, not component ecosystem.
No, that's something we are trying to change very rapidly, and you obviously are a very integral part of that.
Yeah.
Rajan, on the semiconductor space, which is your area of specialty, is there a need that we move towards Atmanirbharta in semiconductors? Because clearly, you see assembling, then sub-assemblies, then the components, even display, seems to be within reach now. But semiconductors is, still looks like very daunting. What is your perception? What is the semiconductor supply chain? How do we move towards Atmanirbharta in semiconductors?
I think in terms of the capabilities of India, I think everything is available. So the ingredient element, whether it was the entrepreneurial mindset or adequate talent or whatever was required in terms of the structural reforms or the government support or the policies, I think they are all coming in place, and some of them are already there. Some which were the binding force to all of these are already coming. I generally see the chip manufacturing as probably one of the most complex one, and it typically is the last stop in that phase of getting everything done. So it's always good to aim at the most complex one, but definitely we should not punish ourselves when we see that we have been able to do a lot more, which is even earlier than that. The country has seen, and country needs to attract a lot of manufacturing in components a lot ahead before you even go to the fab manufacturing. Having said that, I think the volume India is capable to offer to such chip manufacturing companies is not less. And especially when you top it up with, let's say, as I said, maybe look at India as India domestic and India global exports. When that situation comes up, and I wouldn't be surprised, Pankaj, if we probably see a few 100 millions of these phones being exported out of India in the coming few years. So then somebody is looking at a few 100 millions which are sold in India and a few hundred for exports. That becomes a sizable market. Now, what is required for a fab to be locally serving the needs of the market. As I said, a lot of R&D goes into this. And if you see globally the way the fab is structured, we are a fabless company, so we don't produce our own chipsets. We design the chipsets, and then they are produced by big fabrication shops across the world, whether they are predominantly in Taiwan and Korea. We have to have that environment provided to them so that they feel motivated to come to India. And I probably would say that this can be done today. It would need a lot of, I would say, um, positive and a lot of other enablements for them to come to India. I think we are still probably a few years away from that state where we can have those companies come, be it the big names you hear, whether it is Samsung or TSMCs, which are manufacturing the chips for companies like ours who design. A lot of the chip company design companies are primarily fabless in nature. So I think while everything is there, we would probably, I would say, rather to rush on to that aspect, we probably take the steps, intermediate steps, which are enabling the rest of the components, which play a big role. And as you said, the display is getting manufactured. And we need to go deeper into the battery manufacturing, with the cell manufacturing, and then the final assembly and all that, right? The camera can go to a level of building the camera entirely rather than just assembling the camera. So those sort of components in the phone, which are equally critical, need to also go through, where the level of technology for the manufacturer is manufacturing is far lower than when you go to a fab. A fab, if we can see, and I'll give you one example of how quickly that market changes and how complex that could be, is one of the terms you hear is a node size of a chip. So over the last few years, the demand from a smartphone, I think as we started relying on the smartphone more and more to do jobs which were initially not perceived or conceived. So the phone now becomes your camera, it becomes your audio player, it becomes your navigation guide, it becomes your shopping tool, it becomes your gaming device, which replaces the gaming console. When you demand so much under the phone, all of that load goes to the processor. And when the processor is trying to cope up with the massive demand from a screen size of 3.5 10 years back to something like 6.5 or 6.7, which we those days doubted we could hold in our hand, has become the core. In this times, the phone is used for education, conference calls, everything, right? Remote health. When you look at all of that, the chip actually, the processor within the phone is loaded with more and more requirements, and that can be fulfilled in a way to manage the power. And we cannot pack unlimited mAh or power of the battery or the size of the battery. With that sort of a limitation of the form factor, our hand, and the battery and the consumption, we technically the only path left is to go to design more power efficiency in the processor, which comes from the node. And as you move from 28, we moved from 28 nanometer around 8-10 years back now to 14 to 11, 12 to 11, 11 to 10, 10 to 7. And we are looking at launching the 5 nanometer solution somewhere early part of next year. This change actually sounds very easy, right? It looks like, okay, it's the same factory which does it. But essentially what it does mean is your whole lines which build this next node are far, far more complex. And this needs billions of dollars of investment when a node switches. Now, with that sort of an environment, when you need investments in tune of billions of dollars when you switch a node and switch it so quickly, that means you have to continuously keep investing in that setup. And which means also that the necessary volumes and the ecosystem are available. It needless to say that it needs infrastructural requirement like almost a sort of a unending supply of water, right? And a very cheap power and massive probably area to build those factories. I think we have quite a few of them. We already have it. So I don't think we have to worry about that part of the infrastructure. What we have to just look at is when are we ready? And I think those days are not far off. Because the way we are talking about India domestic and India exports, when you make the critical mass, it will motivate any of these companies to come and set up this physical infrastructure in India. I think till that time, if I was allowed, I would look at creating a stronger foundation for the R&D and continue to invest the way we have invested, and we keep investing and we keep building the capabilities of India. I think that is where we should continue to work on.
Rajan, I'll come back to you on a phased manufacturing program for design and get your idea. You've been very complimentary about the skill level available in India. Richard, this is a quantum leap from 28 to $30 billion to $190 billion, which we aspire to do in smartphones. I know you've spoken about other verticals, but the subject today is smartphones, so I'll stick to that. And we'll have an offline conversation on, how much focus is there on other verticals, from set-top boxes to consumer electronics to IT hardware. Everything is being covered now. Rapid policy making is happening. But this massive growth and then the growth of sub-assemblies and components, we have the cutting edge, chip designers and service software engineers. But does India have the capability of delivering on massive number of people for doing the shop floor work? For example, the metal mechanics of very high quality.
Yeah.
Do you find a gap there? Are there any inputs for us for Atmanirbhar?
So I don't know whether it's a gap, but I think you're exactly right. If you think, and my numbers may be a little out of date, but I believe in the Chennai area alone, there's 120,000 engineering graduates each year. So for sure, of the smartest people, there is a bountiful supply chain of people available that we can hire. And similarly, if you're talking about relatively unskilled work, we have no issue finding those people. I feel that if there's one area that needs to be addressed, it's the vocational training. That sort of strata in between the graduates and the unskilled labor. We need to think about how we can introduce more vocational training people who can vocational training programs where people can be trained to do more technician and engineering work on the shop floor in particular industries. So you think about what's happened, what I was saying before about component ecosystem. So an example of injection molding. We need more vocational hands to go and work in injection molding shops. Similarly with battery technology, similarly with displays. And so I feel there's a gap at the moment because we hire engineers and they're super smart people. But in some cases, they're too smart for the roles that we want them to go into, meaning that they're not going to be happy to fill those roles. But there has to be a large group of other people at a lower educational level that with sort of apprenticeship schemes and vocational training, we can bring them in and develop that core cadre of engineers and technicians who's going to build the industrial base because of the knowledge and over time the experience that they have. So vocational training is something that I think India really needs to think about, not just the university level and the degree courses that are offered to people, but how do we get people who are hands-on on the shop floor, who understand processes, machines, material, because that's really the bedrock of manufacturing.
No, very well said. And there are some very profound programs around that, both by the federal government and even Tamil Nadu government. So a workforce for the future is getting ready. And, please keep a hawk eye on that and keep giving us inputs wherever there is a gap. Rajan, I come back to this phased manufacturing program for design. And Richard, I'm going to come back to you on instrumentation and capital goods. As Rajan said that there is some time to go for semiconductors. What about instrumentation, testing equipment, and capital goods? I just keep mulling it. I'll finish with Rajan, and then I'll ask for your closing comments, both of you. Rajan, how do we create a phased manufacturing program for design? India doesn't want to be relegated to a Vietnam type situation that we are only manufacturing. You said it beautifully that we must move up the value chain to research and design. So, what are the best steps to take? You guys are already doing a lot of, your design guys are here already. How do we develop the indigenous companies? What kind of support you guys can give for that?
So I think, Pankaj, honestly, it's already going on. While probably we haven't seen it happening in maybe because it was never structured in a way. But look at one example of that innovation or that research happening in India, and we are in middle of that, so we can tell you that we are seeing it on a daily basis. Uh, the startup ecosystem. Uh, if you look at the way I have seen the startups change, we run a program called Qualcomm Design in India program over the last 5 years, where you invite and companies to participate, and then we promote and we actually incubate and mentor them. The quality of change that we have seen in the startups and is humongous. If they go to do some fundamental research which we hadn't seen happening, right? We have seen companies and startups coming or working on advanced cameras or audios or RF designs. These are fairly complex things that they're doing. And 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 when we look at the government's recent announcement of the 5G hackathon, which was also to identify companies or applications which are going to be looked upon for, or we will look upon them for 5G use cases specific to India. I think those sort of actions actually reveal they're more like discovery mechanisms, and we discover that there are gems of these companies, and they are actually increasing at a pace which we probably do not realize. So if there are 9,000 technology startups in India, and we have got 30,000 overall startups, 30,000 plus. We are, I think, the second or the third largest startup base in the world. But when apart the count of it, if we look at the quality and the type of work they are doing, I think it's a very pleasant situation. So R&D at the lowest grassroots level is happening. Now, this is the startup. And where does it come from? It typically comes from the colleges or the academia, which actually is bringing this talent to the market. We run a program, also a parallel program, we call it Qualcomm Innovation Fellowship, which actually fuels the R&D, which is going at the university PhD level by the PhD level students. And over the last 5 years, we have seen how they are contributing to fundamental research. So that's the second piece we are saying, that as colleges bring up that culture of innovation very early, and we in companies like ours, there are multiple other companies, we are able to urge that most of them should come forward and support that sort of an action at the academic level. That is the second, because then they are going to come out and start and create the startups, and they are going to be creating the unicorns. We have seen so many of them coming, and I think it's only the early stage of creating unicorns in India. We will see many more of these unicorns coming, because they are getting incubated as we see them. Another one which we respect and we actually advocate a lot is patenting the technology. Very important. Qualcomm, we just spent around $62 billion and has 140,000 patents any given point of time, either filed or live. I think that is very, very important to have that culture of patenting your own technology. And that is what we do through another program. We try to educate. We also support these startups to patent the technology. So when you talk about a self-reliance of even R&D, self-reliance of technology, I think this is where it's going to build. It is not something you can buy and paste and keep it here. It's something you will have to create here locally. It's not that something we go and shop for it and bring it here. Maybe a technology you can bring it here, right? Or a capital good, you can bring it here. But I think you have to lay the foundation, and that's very clearly visible. I would say in companies like ours who employ tens of thousands of these engineers are basically getting created. So we take the pride in saying that while a good part of the effort of the country goes in manufacturing, The second big attempt is skilling. I see companies like ours playing a massive role in skilling because what jobs are offered, what research is being done by these 10,000 employees of Qualcomm sitting in India is cutting edge. These are the people who probably wouldn't have, I would say, the strength of we Indians are actually leveraged so well by companies like ours. So I would say the ingredient elements are already in place. Uh, I would more look at the startups and the technology they are bringing in. They are going to be the foundation for massive R&D, which I would say like massive IoT, I would say massive R&D. Well, core R&Ds absolutely will continue, and we will keep investing in this country, and we will keep creating skilling in this country. I think the early stage of this skill is coming from the colleges and then from the startups. We continue promoting them. I think that's where we will see Atmanirbhar India in terms of R&D.
Very beautifully said. Richard, my last question to you is now on capital goods, testing equipment, and instrumentation. Do you think India should have a plan for that in the future? Because that is something we've not looked at the moment. And your inputs would be most useful. And we are also slightly running out of time, so a minute or two to each one of you for your closing comments after this capital goods.
I'll go quickly. I understand the time constraint. So capital goods, I actually think where the focus needs to go towards is infrastructure type products. And I don't mean infrastructure in terms of bridges and roads. And I think it can be wrapped into capital goods. But I think power generation, power conditioning, renewable power are all areas. I think the build out of telecom systems has to come domestically. And I think the focus has got to be in those type of infrastructure products moving forward. Because I saw what happened, 5, 6, 7 years ago when the networks were being built or being upgraded in India. It was the money was going out to overseas companies. That cannot be allowed to continue. And so I think what the government of India needs to be thinking about is how they can kickstart the infrastructure by kickstarting the manufacturing of the products that support the infrastructure. I don't know if I answer your question, Pankaj.
Richard, I was talking more about our capital goods, the SMT machines, our complex testing machines, our, the instrumentation within the electronic factories, the provision of, clean rooms, all the infrastructure around that.
So I think it will come, but it will come relatively slowly. And the reason for that is I think it would start with, you take an SMT machine as an example, the first step is to get a service support center in India to support the machines that are in place. And that has come. I actually think we're way off getting, for example, SMT machines moved into India because the scale of manufacturing of SMT machines is actually relatively low. There's millions around the world, but there aren't millions sold every year. And so to try and come up with a distributed manufacturing network for an SMT machine probably doesn't make that much sense. So when you talk about clean rooms, for example, absolutely. Because what you're looking at there are the kind of infrastructure type equipment that I was referring to, whether it's power conditioning or air conditioning or environmental conditioning, for sure. Because that sort of product not only goes into clean rooms, but it's got tangential markets around power conditioning, air conditioning, environmental conditioning.
Fantastic. Now, Rajan, a minute each to both of you to just your winding up comments because we have to close.
I think we discussed actually a good length, Pankaj, of the whole gamut of what the country is positioned and where it's headed and what truly could be the challenges and the advantages. I think there is no other time I would say we are positioned better, for sure, in terms of the government support, in terms of the industries coming forward, in terms of the R&D, in terms of the startups, in terms of the academia stepping forward. I think, as I said, it's something like you have all the ingredients right in place. Some of that has already started building up. So we have to continue this focus. And I think With that, if we were having this conversation 5 years down the line, we would have, I'm very, very sure it would be a totally different conversation.
Thank you. Richard?
Yeah, I broadly agree. I think the groundwork is there. You've got a government which is business friendly, which has made great strides towards easing business, towards supporting business with the right sort of schemes. You've got a highly talented population and well-educated engineers coming out. It's, to me, a question of following through on all of that, all of those good things that are happening and move it to the next level. There's one other point. There's actually two other points. First of all, we've got to get past COVID. And I don't know how long that's going to take. Maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's 9 months. But I think there's going to be difficulty in continuing the momentum until we can get something like back to normal. And secondly, for many, many different reasons, there's a spirit around the world now of regionalization. And India needs to think about how it can tap into that regionalization that's going on, because I think it can play to India's advantage.
Absolutely. Okay, I'll just wind up now. I think this was a fascinating discussion, and that is all that we were expecting that from two luminaries like you. And I think Atmanirbharta in our mind is exactly what we all discussed, that we are moving towards step by step greater not only self-reliance, but absorbing the best from the world, the global value chains, the best technologies, building our small companies and startups to improve, grow in stature, grow in capability, grow in skills. And we take a share of the world electronics market, starting with smartphones. This is clearly the objective. And the sense I get is that while there are challenges in this Atmanirbharta drive, like skills at the entry level, at the operator level, at the component manufacturing shop floor level, I think that's a gap which clearly we rapidly need to fill because of the accelerating manufacturing aspirations, which surely we will do. So I think it's looking very positive, except the COVID challenge at the moment, which is a very serious challenge, and India is trying to cope with it to the best of its abilities. And I think this is another 6 months, Richard, that we should be sorting it out. Rajan, on the design front, I think your stress was very profound, and I think we will touch base again and work on a phased design program now, a PDP instead of a PMP. I think PMP is now behind us. We are, we have achieved those objectives. Import substitution is now not required. We need to rapidly move forwards. In fact, I have been startling people by saying that I have an import target for electronics. Because if we are going to export $500 billion, we'll probably need to import $200 to $50 billion. So that kind of openness, that all great technologies, everything, all the best, as you said, 140,000 patents, all those technologies need to resonate here, and we have to be a very open country, and we need to, that is what Atmanirbharta will be, that India has a place in the sun in the global smartphone market. We have a 40% share, be the number one nation or probably a close number two, and see that we do not become a protectionist country. And I don't think that's going to happen. So the future looks good. Thank you, gentlemen. It was a pleasure. I think in a way, our panelists didn't join us. We had a very good free run, and we were able to get more of your thoughts, and it was simply wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you, thanks, Rajan.
Thank you, Mr. Rajan and Mr. Richard, for joining this session and for spending your valuable time. I also thank the moderator, Mr. Pankaj, for carrying the session very positive, as a very positive interaction, actually. So we will now move on to the next session. which is a session on cutting edge technologies and innovation. And the session will be moderated by Mr. Muthukumaran. So I take this opportunity to introduce Mr. Muthukumaran to the audience. So Mr. Muthukumaran is the global delivery head of Cognizant. In this role, he is responsible for delivery of digital engagements across digital strategy, interactive AI and analytics, and IoT capabilities. In addition, he is also responsible for driving digital transformation within Cognizant as well as in client organizations. Mr. Muthu is a key member of Cognizant's executive leadership team. He is responsible for charting the strategic direction of the company and enabling clients to navigate the shift to the digital economy. In his 24 years of Cognizant experience, he has performed various roles across multiple geographies, including US, UK, and India. So I would now like to invite Mr. Muthukumaran to take the session forward. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for the warm introduction. Good evening to our virtual audience. I'm excited to introduce a topic on cutting edge technologies and innovation, focused around 5 key areas: augmented reality, adaptive learning, artificial intelligence, intelligent automation, and quantum computing. I'm joined by my fellow colleagues from the IT industry, and I'll introduce each of them. My first panelist is Mr. Dinanath Kolkar, Dina as we call him. Dina is the Vice President and Global Head Analytics and Insights at Tata Consultancy Services. In this role, Dina guides some of the world's best companies in their journeys to unlock the potential of data through the power of analytics and artificial intelligence. Dina has been recognized as one of the top 100 influential global data leaders and data visionaries. He advocates data centricity as a strategic lever for business growth and transformation. He plays a key role in ensuring success in TCS and their clients' business 4.0 transformation journeys. He also provides leadership guidance and strategic direction in the fields of education, sustainability, agriculture, data for good through his volunteering work at IEEE Pune International Center and the Tata Group. My next panelist is my colleague from Cognizant, Mr. K.S. Ganesan, KSG as we fondly call him. KSG in his current role drives technology automation strategy and leads efforts in shifting focus from automating for cost efficiency to automating for agility and innovation. In his earlier role as the CTO of Cognizant Cloud and Infrastructure, he set up the CTO office function driving strategic transformation initiatives around including hybrid and multi-cloud, legacy modernization, IT transformation, and DevOps. KSG has completed his executive education from MIT Sloan on artificial intelligence implications for business strategy. KSG recently also became a member of Harvard Business Review Advisory Council. He's an active member of NASSCOM work group towards development of cloud computing qualification. He's an eternal leader, always in the pursuit of knowledge for either personal or professional reasons. KSG is a CCIE program emeritus, having been active for more than 20 years. And my third panelist, and I would tap into a lot of his views on education, is Mr. Krishnan, the business unit head for education at TCS ION. Krishnan is the business unit head for education at TCS ION. He carries rich experience across geographies in US, Europe, and India, working closely with Fortune 500 clients across industry verticals such as banking, telecom, manufacturing, retail, and education. Krishnan has held several leadership positions in strategy, business development, delivery, and products in TCS. Krishnan is an alumnus of IMMA, a gold medalist in his MBA in engineering. As a lifelong learner, he has pursued his executive education from MIT, Columbia Business School, and was selected amongst India's top young leaders in the Economic Times Young Leaders Program. So I have a distinct set of technology leaders in my panel. So I'll start off by saying, obviously we all feel thankful in an industry where technology plays a lead role and literally runs business. across industries. All the more now that we feel maybe an extra gratitude that the power of digital technologies has given us, especially in the middle of a pandemic. I can only imagine if this were to happen maybe 25 years back, where we had probably no internet, no home computers or mobile, where I guess the entire economy would have gone down, our communication channels would have gone down, and there might have been much more anxiety than we could have ever imagined as we are today. We are in the current phase of what we call the fourth industrial revolution. Our evolution is a constant process, and the pace is ever increasing. We'll soon have a new catchphrase, and a new quantum leap could well be in the works. So in front of this panel, I'm going to set across 4 themes, and I'll go fire them as specific questions. So I'll start off with the first one. I paid a lot of tribute to digital technologies, but I will start with a quote when I was a young, ardent computer science student, and I was switching from C to learning C++. And I remember this quote from Jan Strostrup. He said, C makes it easy to shoot yourself in the foot. C++ makes it harder, but when you do, it blows your whole leg off. So with that as a context, my first obvious question is going to be to the panelists. What do you think are the pros and cons of this cutting edge technologies that I talked about? Maybe Dina, I would start with you, and then we'll go with the other panelists.
Yeah, thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here on the panel. I will give you a perspective around India and the condition, the situation that we are in. And as you rightly said, whenever we have these type of situations, this is one of the best opportunities for us to step back and transform us in a significant manner. And the condition that we have been put into is pretty much lending itself. And as we rightly say, the necessity is really there, and we have to really look at innovation in a big way. So I'll talk about artificial intelligence primarily and its ability to actually transform things in a significant manner. I'll take a couple of areas where I have been very closely involved with. One has been in the area of healthcare, and the other in the area of agriculture. Now, take a look at AI in context of the healthcare business itself. When you look at the current primary health structure itself, which is there, it is not at all robust enough. And while there are people who can provide door-to-door services, but the access to the doctor doesn't exist. How do you use AI in a significant manner to drive that scale would be very critical. So there are absolutely possibilities which are there with usage of AI and digital technologies in driving the scale. So it's an opportunity for India to actually not just do a leapfrog in its healthcare system, but do a pole vault. And as you said, a quantum leap is what we should really look at from a pros point of view. And same is the case with agriculture, be it the entire ecosystem of agriculture, which is now opening up given some of the changes which are happening in the field of agriculture, the opening up of different channels, the supply chain related aspects which are completely disrupting the way people can actually sell the produce that they're creating. And I believe that there are cutting edge technologies which they can also use for farming. The critical aspect over here is both these technologies, while they are good, the adoption of those technologies are a bigger thing for us to really watch out to. So when you ask me about what are the cons, we need to actually experiment a lot in the context of India. And I think we need to look at young minds and the student community to actually participate and democratize the usage of AI in a very significant manner. And what is key to bringing that learning is the aspect of trying out various things and data, which is very critical. So the government should absolutely look at enabling those cons by means of having data being made available as open data for many of these universities and research groups to actually pick up things. So while there are a lot of pros which are there, and cons are also there in alignment with the pros, but it is important that we understand what those are and enable the community to actually get over those very quickly.
Thank you, Dina. Maybe Krishnan, I know you're going to be very passionate about the power of technology in education. But I would like to hear your views on the pros and cons.
Yeah. So at the outset, I want to say that today the technology is moving so fast that the question is no longer can something be done, but the question is more should something be done. And that's where the focus on ethics, on responsible use of all technologies, whether it's AI, machine learning, data science, comes to bear. And as business leaders, we need to bear in mind not just looking at deciding what technology to use from a short-term perspective, but really look at it from a long-term perspective, where economics is just one aspect of our decision making. We look at our decisions from a multi-stakeholder perspective, from the community angle, as Dina rightfully mentioned, that there is significant opportunity for the use of this technology to create impact in the country. Agriculture, education, healthcare are amongst the prominent ones. And there is no shortage of the application as far as technology is concerned, but responsible use is very important to cover up on the cons. And the other aspect that I want to touch upon is we speak about technology, but what needs to be done and is a great opportunity for our country is to use technology and create very strong products and platforms, because we do see that industry boundaries are getting, are disappearing. So firms across industries need to come together and look at how these technologies can be used as products, as platforms with significant industry participation. And two other aspects which are related to this is to ensure that the products and platforms are embedded in very strong processes, and we keep the customer experience at the heart at what we do. And as I mentioned earlier, building very strong foundation of trust is what is going to help us, achieve. There are many examples of great technologies, but which didn't scale up because it was not able to win the customer trust. And responsible decision making is going to make sure that we win the customer trust and are able to, realize the benefit of many of these technologies, products, platforms. The opportunity exists to scale, and this is an area that we should, really focus on and ensure responsible use of technology for creating impact.
Thank you, Krishnan. I mean, that's interesting because, I certainly agree with the fact that the power of technology is real, but it's probably become so powerful that you've got to have a sense of responsibility. And we started talking about responsible AI as a concept, because even with clients, we have seen where some of the power of AI and leveraging data, you can actually know more about the customer than the customer themselves want you to know about them. So it's interesting to see that. So KSG, I would be keen to hear your views. Please.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity, Muthu and CII team. Before I get into the application of technology, I just wanted to stress on one point on the technology itself, because the context is about technology and innovation. If you see the last 30 years, at no point in time you had development on these technologies happening at an equal pace, right? There was always a lag of software overcoming infrastructure ahead of application, data systems ahead of applications ahead of infrastructure. So if you actually see 90s and 2000, early 2000 and 2020, I think there were always a lag in each of these developments which were happening around all these platforms and environments and technologies. Technology was always there. It was always there 20 years back. But I think we have come to a time where the confluence is of all these technologies. If you actually say, hey, can you pick one? AI cannot work without an NLP. AR/VR cannot work with an AI. AI and AR/VR cannot work with a cloud backend. All this cannot happen without having a proper data, right? So if you actually see, there is no one technology in tandem. All of them are working in tandem, right? I think that's an important thing to recognize in the time in which we are living, that the development of technology is working towards an unified kind of a model where the development is happening around data, development is happening around cloud systems, development is happening around AI systems, AR, VR, and so on and so forth. So that's point one. Point number two, take an Indian context. I don't think that there is a, we are as a, apply these in a context of healthcare and agriculture, for example. I'll just limit myself these to two for paucity of time. We spent around 1.25, 1.28% of the GDP, and you add the private sector, we are spending around 3.6% of in the healthcare for all our citizens. Now, and in fact, when you compare it with the global average, it's around 8.5%, and in the developed economy, it is 5x than this, right? So, and we, as a government, we have also stated that there's going to be huge focus on healthcare, primary care, wellness, and so on and so forth. So there is a citizen-related consumption environment which is getting created. There is the confluence of technologies which is happening. Take, for example, agriculture still represents 16% of our GDP. And when we are aiming at $5 trillion, you can just visualize what all this, what is the size of the agriculture contribution on a 5 trillion base. It's going to be huge. So applying these technologies on an agriculture domain, whether it is a pest control system, whether it is smart pumping system, whether it is identification of weather, using these AI, AR, VR, and all these technologies is going to only accelerate the adoption in an agriculture. There are about 500 plus agri-techs itself which just popped up in the last 24 months. If you actually see huge investments which are happening around healthcare and life science related startups. So if you actually put these pieces and the blocks together, technology is getting confluence of technology is happening. There is a market, and then there is a government initiative which is converging. There is a climate which is getting developed, and then there is a huge market, and then there is an ecosystem of players which is getting developed in order to address that market. It is no longer one size fit all and one large conglomerate addressing. There are a lot of players addressing each part of the ecosystem, be it healthcare, be it agriculture, be it education, and so on and so forth. So I think if you put these all in one bucket, we are looking at application of these technologies, as the gentleman pointed out very clearly, and outcome of these. So there is, I don't think at any point in time post-independence, we have had this kind of a situation in an Indian context where there is a market, there is a government which is favorable, willing to invest, and then there are technologies. And then more importantly, I have not brought up, there are people willing to consume, and that consumption is going to lead into a very larger citizen-based system or a B2B system or a B2C system. I will stop here and I'll come for round two.
Kind of the first round, and no surprises, all the leaders vote for more pros and cons. But I'm glad you brought interesting insights on what those cons are. And KSD, you led me to my next question. You answered some of it. But my next question was focused on healthcare, education, and agriculture, particularly around India, because it's almost, especially education and healthcare, it goes into fundamental rights and basic necessities of every citizen. So maybe I'll start with Krishnan. Give us your views. Obviously, I know it's going to be education, but it'll also be interesting to get your views on, what technologies do you think is going to be making more impact in specific industries? And it'll be interesting to get your insights.
Sure. So at the outset, I want to say that it is a well-known fact that no country in the world has become a developed nation without focusing on its education ecosystem. And as industry leaders, we know it for a fact that our growth story is no longer constrained by the demand side opportunity. Yes, the COVID situation has put brakes on some of the industries. It has created new opportunities. But our growth is definitely constrained on the supply side. And it is very, very important for the industry to play a pivotal role in revamping the education ecosystem and ensuring that not just for today, but for the years ahead, our talent supply is as per our needs. And today, if you see, we have more than 40 million students studying in higher education in the country. There's no shortage of talent. We have demographic dividend working in our favor. And I believe that transformation in education needs to happen on three distinct dimensions. The first dimension is, can we come together and baseline the talent in the country in terms of the requirement for the industry? And I will give a very specific example of how we did this in TCS on the TCS ION platform a couple of years back through the TCS National Qualifier Test, which was a standardized recruitment that we did through digital platforms that we have built. And we were able to increase the number of applicants from what used to be around 80,000 to 3.5 lakh students in the country. We were able to reach out from about 300 institutions to about 3,500 institutions. And the most important part is we were able to significantly drop the cost of recruitment by doing what used to take many months to a matter of weeks. And what this can happen for a large company like TCS, I do believe that it can happen at a country level. If we can baseline the talent, very similar to an SAT score that is used by higher education institution in the US to baseline the applicant pool. This is a great opportunity to baseline the talent in the country, the 40 million students and lateral talent. Now, once we do that, which brings to the second dimension of transformation, with all of this data and baselining, we still need to take very proactive steps in designing strong curriculum, which is not forced upon students, but makes it very engaging for students to consume. And the trick here is to embed the context of the industry into the curriculum and then use, as I said, we are not short of technologies. We have, best of technologies, whether it's artificial intelligence, machine learning, create personalized, bite-sized, addictive learning. If we can be hooked on Facebook and other social models, platforms, why can't we be hooked on learning? And that's the second dimension, and industry has to play a very key role. This cannot be done by academic institutions alone or policymakers. Industry has to play a leading role in order to bring great quality learning so that the baseline talent can then aspire for larger roles, in the industry. And the last key dimension that never gets spoken about, which is important, and it's like, needs to be done if the other two dimensions have to fire, is to create very strong outcome linkage. And what do I mean by outcome linkage is industry needs to clarify upfront what are their talent needs, what kind of career opportunity exists, what kind of salary levels, what kind of roles. Because without that clarity, even if we create the other two dimensions, people are not going to, invest their time, energy, money to go through learning programs or baseline themselves unless it's absolutely clear on what is the end outcome. And again, industry has to come forward and define this with as much clarity as possible. And once we do that, and once we address the other two dimensions, I believe we can really, fast forward our progress as a country to, tap into world's opportunities and put ourselves in a very, very good position for growth.
Thank you. That's very interesting. So I would say it's okay to be an addict as long as it's related to learning. Dina, again, same topic. You talked about some of it, and I know in your outside of work, you've been doing some of this as well. So it'd be interesting to get your perspective on this technology's impact in core areas of education, healthcare, and so on.
Sure.
Edina?
I'm not able to unmute myself. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So let me give you a perspective around healthcare itself. And I'll probably tell you a very interesting incident that I went through. I had to travel to Brazil and I had to take a yellow fever vaccination. And it is available only in the government hospital. And they have a very good interface to actually take an appointment. They capture all the data online. However, it was a big surprise for me when I actually landed up at the place. I probably saw 4 different people capture the same information about me, my details, all over again. and 3 of those were doctors. And when you talk about digital, it's all about actually capturing the information in digital form. And here there were people capturing it on piece of papers. And I was wondering about what really was happening over here was unnecessarily wastage of talent in doing things which were not really productive and not really using the power of digital. I'll just draw a parallel over here. What is the advantage that we have today? We have a billion plus people on the Aadhaar system. Through your biometric, you can actually identify an individual and have details which are required about the individual to do the KYC and know who the person is. However, we end up with looking at wasting a lot of talent and wasting a lot of skilled resources doing things which are in the non-digital space. And I feel that's the very big essence of what we need to transform in the setup. And I'll draw a zoom out and then look at drug development. And we are all seeing, everybody is very anxiously looking at, hey, when is the vaccine going to get launched? But keep in mind, the amount of effort which is going on in vaccine development requires so much amount of manual effort. You actually go through it. I have actually done a very large transformation for one of our pharma companies where we have transformed their entire clinical trials and their pharmacovigilance using AI. What used to get done with about just 30% automation now gets to about 90% automation. So we are able to scale up that very significantly. And when you actually look at drug development, and especially in situations like this, the only way we will be able to scale up and fast track is by augmenting the skills which are there, which are high-end skills like doctors, pharmacists, statistician, to use augmenting them with AI as an assistant to them. So I think that's one very important aspect. So taking up on the AI as an assistant aspect, look at it from the completely other side of it. You have unskilled labor or people who have just an orientation about what it means to ask a person about how they are feeling and getting that person to capture some amount of information, but having a doctor remotely or a doctor or a trained algorithm which tells, okay, these could possibly be the reasons why the person is unwell. So taking that assistance, one, we talked about assisting high skilled labor doing some different types of tasks, which was data entry in this case. On the other end, low skilled labor who is not a doctor, but potentially can perform almost 80% of the tasks that a doctor can possibly do. So different dimension to look at. And we've been working on this space to the entire value chain, right from drug development to actually providing the services at the last mile with the usage of AI. And I do believe that we have a great opportunity. And the good thing is that, as you rightly said, just like what's happening in the agri-tech space at KSG was mentioning, I think there is a significant amount of innovation which is happening in the healthcare space. And I'm seeing a lot of startups coming up with very innovative ideas, which can be plugged and played into the system. But as Krishnan mentioned, I want to highlight the fact that it is a very highly regulated and we need to ensure that we take responsible decisions on adopting these technologies.
Thank you, Dina. And I would like to use this forum to state I've been involved in some of the governance with Tamil Nadu state. And they've very pleased to note that they've actually put in a lot of infrastructure in terms of connectivity to remote villages and just setting up the basic infrastructure. So to your point on de-skilling and so on, it's a great opportunity where technology can actually increase the throughput of skilled doctors and and make healthcare affordable to a common man across the state. So thank you for your input. KSG, I know you touched upon this, but further insights into how you see some of these technologies impact some of those core industries that we've talked about.
Yeah. So I think the other two gentlemen spoke about the bigger aspects of it, and I'll restrict to one example each in each of the sectors. Right, in education, I do believe these technologies. End of the day, when you are talking about education and usage of all these technologies, it has to be collaborative, it has to be cooperative, inclusive, and it has to be adaptive. Right. I'll just take an example. Recently, I don't know how many of you would have seen, there is a LinkedIn post which was there. There was a girl in a tribal area She was going to a place where there was no reach of a cell phone, so she's trying to take an exam or a class on an 8th standard, and then the father of the child has built a small hut kind of stuff, right? Because the reach was not there, the signal was not available, and that became a huge hit. And I don't know how many of you see that. So she walks 2 kilometers to attend the class in a small hut where the reach can be there. So the technology is available, but there is still, in my opinion, I think purely from an Indian context, many of these technologies, whether you talk AI in healthcare, it's all about democratization of knowledge and democratization of reach. You have to be inclusive in that approach, whether you apply in healthcare, whether you apply in education, whether you apply in agri-tech. The key aspects of these technologies allows you to democratize the knowledge, whether you use AI, whether you use AR, VR, and so on and so forth. And I think, in my opinion, you have to solve the reach problem, right? The other day, we were trying to collect set of phones for a Ooty tribal area school, which is far away, right? And the school people are complaining, no, there is no signal which is available, right? And I think we have a long way to go there, in my opinion. And if we don't accept that problem, we will not solve the problem. So I think there are islands of excellence in all this, but there are oceans of inadequacy in reach, in my opinion, right? And I think we need to bridge those two from an education perspective in terms of reach. The second element from a healthcare perspective, I think we still believe, I think the applying AI, you go to a hospital today, you see, if you see, other than the patients which you see, you will see people, half the time you will see people running around with papers, right? And I don't know whether you have noticed it, right? Somebody will be paying something, we still do paper, we still do radiology in films, we still do, so there is a lot more to it. And I think he was alluding to the fact that why can't you have a biometric data and which is linked to an Aadhaar construct? Why can't you have a citizen health record also linked to a Aadhaar construct, right? Because in an Indian context, we don't have those GDPR or HIPAA or those kind of regulation. We have still not digitized any of our record. I still carry all my doctor paper, this thing on paper. We still not digitized it. I think we have to move into more a consumer-based healthcare, and usage of AI and all these technologies will only help to increase the reach, reduce the difference between the haves and the have-nots, and then democratize the ecosystem across agriculture, across healthcare, and education as well.
Fair point, KSG, and I would say that that's something that's a real practical issues that we have. And to be fair, some of this paper-oriented processes we are seeing in large enterprises as well. So it's something that we'll have to attack at the enterprise and the government. So I have 2 rounds of questions, and in the interest of time, I will keep the third round a little short and have you answer my pinpointed question. So post-COVID, given that we all know that it's going to be a new norm that's going to be setting in, and it has various implications on all of the industries across the world. I named 5 technologies, so I would like each of you to take a shot on which technology is going to make that quantum leap, just because COVID has accelerated some of this shift to digital. Free for all.
Yeah, so I will go in for AI. I mentioned to you earlier also in our discussions, it is India's opportunity. And the good thing is that we have got a overall AI strategy put in through the work that NITI Aayog has done, the work that NASSCOM has done. There is a significant amount of awareness. The student community is very excited about it. There's a lot of talent which is getting built up. And the biggest opportunity we see is in the context of space. The problem that India faces is that, as KSG was mentioning, we have pockets of excellence. There is a significant amount of those where we don't have opportunities to take things. Inclusivity can be driven with the usage of AI. That is one very important aspect. So when you look at inclusive, scalable, and sustainable development, I think AI will play a very significant role. And we've started seeing benefits of it. We've started seeing the type of interest in the organizations. We're talking about manufacturing. We're talking about scaling up the entire Make in India program or the Atmanirbhar initiatives. And you will not be able to scale up very quickly unless you have the type of AI-based solutions in place. We were just looking at very simple things. You're talking about the usage of AR and VR. You may not necessarily be able to bring people into the factories to actually train them, but you can still use those technologies to train them remotely using some of these technologies. So I think we've actually done it very effectively, especially on safety training for people who work in steel industry, which is very, very hazardous, to train them and to give them a perspective of what exactly are the hazards and what are the risks that they face. That was one of the award-winning entries that we had last year from working along with Tata Steel. So very clearly, there are opportunities which have real life examples. They've already been piloted. The opportunity to scale it up will be there. However, indigenization has to play a very significant role. If you have to depend significantly on importing things, will not work. It will have to be indigenized. And that, I think, is another dimension, given the combination of indigenization, which is getting a significant amount of focus. And we've had phenomenal success stories, right? You look at the LED revolution that India led. A 300 rupees bulb came down to less than 50 rupees, right? With the indigenization, with the type of scale that we were able to deliver. I think India has the opportunity to drive scale, and that will make it a lot more affordable to adopt a lot of these technologies.
So, Casey, you want to go next?
No, I will follow the AI pattern. So you go.
So I have a view that more than focusing on technology and having a product-centric view, organizations need to start looking at what is the purpose that they and the problem statement that they are solving from the consumer, from the industry perspective. And once we clarify on the purpose of the organization, then work backwards in terms of how do we solve that problem statement that we have identified, which aligns to the larger purpose of the organization. And when we come to that point, there are multiple technologies that can be leveraged. But more importantly, is, as I think Casey already pointed out, it is the confluence of the technology. How does AI, machine learning, data that IoT gives, and a host of other technology that then solves the problem statement. So I would rather say that as firms, as leaders, we need to start from the consumer standpoint, and then work backwards, and then identify what technology we need to adopt to solve that problem, which aligns to our overall corporate goals.
Absolutely, and I think Muthu, I will go with what Krishnan was also saying. So I will just add a couple of more points to what he said. I think what is important is not what technologies. Technology is always available. It will always be available. 70 years back, quantum computing was available. Now we are still talking quantum computing is another 10 years away, and so on and so forth, right? So it will always be there. So what is important is, I think, the addressing a problem at a scale from an Indian context. I think as a country, the COVID has taught us to invest heavily on primary healthcare, life science, and education as two core sectors, right? And of course, we were always an economy which was primarily reliant on agriculture. We moved away in the late 90s into the early 2000s into the services sector. But I think if you are able to address these sectoral scale by these consumptions of these technologies, and these are suitcase technology, you put anything inside that suitcase, NLP, it can go inside, any of these technologies can go inside an overall umbrella called AI. Right? So I think this sectoral scale is important. That's point number one. And in my opinion, I think more than training, we always associate training to an IT industry. 5 lakh people of engineering graduates is Cognizant hiring, TCS hiring, and so on and so forth. In my opinion, I think if you are able to take the textile worker working in Coimbatore, adopt an AI. See, he or she is using AI in a citizen construct. When you do Googling search, you are using some form of search AI algorithm at the back end. If you are able to consume that level of democratization of a search engine to his applicability in his domain, and use those technologies for he is able to visualize a crop pattern better. He is able to give an ophthalmology physician, somebody in down south, he is able to treat his patient better using these technologies, while technology is residing in the back end. Yet he is seeing the benefits of the technology, and he has learned some of these on how to use and impart those kind of vocational training and bring them into the overall skill development ecosystem in usage of technologies across these sectors. I think we will be one of the star in the overall global ecosystem, in my opinion. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. In fact, we are running out of time, and all of you have answered my next topic, which is about skilling. But I'll just conclude on the topic to say, of course, technology or all of these technologies are not just for the IT sector. Clearly, it applies across a broad industry. And even from a skilling perspective, it's not just the engineering and the traditional technology skills. It's also about skilling a large, broader set of people involved in vocational training and so on. And I also think that, and I'm sure the panelists will agree, it's not just technologists who have to excel in it. We need a broad set of complementary skills, arts and other areas, design thinking and so on, to help in the pursuit of, I guess, leveraging the power of the scan of all of these technologies together. So let me conclude by saying very interesting insights. Thank you, leaders, Dina, and KSG. I obviously took some notes, but interesting perspectives. Clearly, the confluence of all of these technologies is the real power, and not any particular isolated technology by itself. And being frugal in the context of India, and having it affordable and hitting the impact of education, healthcare to the largest strata of our society is going to be key. So thank you, appreciate your time, and thank you, audience, for listening patiently to us. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you for your valuable time and for your address here in this session. We would now move on to the next session today. So the next session will be a roundtable on the topic, the automation of everything era. And we have 4 eminent speakers who will be addressing in this session. The session would be chaired by Mr. Raghu Ayasamy. I have the pleasure of introducing Mr. Raghu Ayasamy to the audience. So Mr. Raghu Ayasamy is the Senior Vice President and Global Head of Engineering and Industrial Services and Internet of Things Business Units at the Tata Consultancy Services Limited. EIS is responsible for bringing innovation and speed to product development and for integrating seamlessly to manufacturing. EIS customers span discrete domains such as automotive, aerospace, high-tech, medical devices, and industrial machinery, as well as process industries such as consumer packaged goods, utilities, oil and gas, chemicals, pharma, and resources. Raghu also focuses on industrial internet or IoT and leads TCS efforts in bringing services transformation in various industries. TCS has developed a number of IoT and artificial intelligence-based solutions such as remote asset management, connected health, connected devices, and connected supply chain. Raghu participates in various leading forums in IoT and also in Industry 4.0. So I will now request Mr. Raghu Ayasamy to take the session forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaykumar. Very good evening to everyone who was joining this event, and I want to welcome our co-panel members, Chulanga from CIO of Daimler India Commercial Trucks, and Dilip Sawhney, Managing Director of Rockwell Automation India, and we have Zarir Lagrana. He's from Executive Director of Tata Chemicals. So we have a set of very eminent panelists joining us today to discuss this topic of the automation of everything era. Let me quickly introduce the panelists before I set the context. Mr. Langrana, Zarir Langrana, is Executive Director and President of Global Chemical Business in Tata Chemicals and responsible for the operation and growth of its basic chemistry business globally and new ventures in specialty chemicals focused on nutraceuticals, and specialty silicas. He also serves as the board of the international subsidiaries of Tata Chemicals. Prior to that, he was COO of the India operations, and in previous assignments, he has headed the global marketing and the strategy function, overseeing many departments like sales, marketing, R&D, new product development, and many functions in that company. He has also headed the corporate strategy and business development function. Graduate in economics from Loyola College in University of Madras. And postgraduate qualification in business management from XLRI Jamshedpur. He has attended a number of advanced development programs, executive development programs in Harvard Business School and other institutions. Thank you, Zarir, for joining us, and welcome to this panel. And we have Dilip Sani. He's the Managing Director, Rockwell Automation, with us. Dilip is responsible for leading the Rockwell Automation's India business, developing the market, creating partnerships, and building a team that serves customers across all over the country. Has more than 25 years of experience in industrial automation and healthcare technology. He's a honors in electrical engineering from IIT Roorkee, and he began his career with L&T, and then he joined GE as sales manager with GE Fanuc and grew to the position of country CEO in India as well as in USA. And in 2005, Dilip moved to GE Healthcare as Vice President Sales South Asia, and from where he moved to this current position with Rockwell Automation. And Dilip was the past President of Automation Industry of Association and member of CII Manufacturing Council. Dilip, welcome, and I think your expertise and experience in automation is going to be key for this discussion today on the automation of everything era, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Raghu.
And we have Chilanga Pereira. He's CIO of Daimler India Commercial Vehicles, and Chilanga graduated from New York with an honors dual degree in finance and mathematics with concentration in corporate law. He started with investment banking and then later moved to bond trading. His career in Daimler started in 2016, worked in the Daimler Trucks Asia in Japan, and then he has worked in a number of technologies like connectivity, telematics, and worked in IT side in metadata management and data lake. He worked in Mercedes-Benz in Germany, and then he worked in the CEO's office of Dr. Zedze before he moved back to India and took this position in 2019, and currently serving as CIO of Daimler India Commercial Vehicles, Chennai. And welcome, Chilanga, and very happy to have you here with us in the panel.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you. I will quickly start off with a short presentation to set this context, and then we will go over into the panel discussion. Let me see how I can share this. So, is the presentation visible?
Yes, Raghu.
Yeah,
it is.
Okay, thank you. So today we look at automation of everything era. It's about bringing connectivity and representing the physical context for all our systems today. So our ability today with the advent of Internet of Things and ability to sense and collect data from multiple sources and able to process that information to develop insights and using that insights improve our systems, improve our decision making and the performance is actually phenomenal today given the technology that has really evolved over the last few years. So we really focus on, it is not just about automation, because automation as a term has been there for many years, for a couple of decades now, and industrial automation is a very mature space with SCADA systems and many automation systems were there for quite a long time. But what is now new? What is that we should look forward from a future perspective is looking at how you are able to connect multiple devices, multiple systems and processes, and able to collect that information and apply intelligence on top of it to really come out with systems that can actually be semi-autonomous or autonomous. So we call that as responding to a physical context with intelligence. The intelligence is built through AI systems. I think the previous session was on artificial intelligence or through machine learning. To really, once we are able to do that, we can create exponential value for businesses. So we see this in three large dimensions in terms of how we can really use this capability of connectivity, IoT, to realize autonomous systems. So when it is autonomous, it is able to decide for itself, and it empowers human being to make more informed decisions. So the stages in that is what we call as connect in context, which is basically to collect the information and have a sensor, gateways, automation system to bring the data into the foundation. The second stage of maturity would be it becomes predictive. So you build some intelligence, analytics, machine learning on top of it to bring that intelligence. And of course, the third stage is how we can make it self-healing, self-optimizing, and ability to actually, it can operate without much of human capabilities or augmenting the human capabilities that we have. That is the roadmap to autonomous systems, what we are seeing today. And when we looked at it, how does really this can enable the transformation in an enterprise? It's a very interesting chart. As you see that many organizations can look at starting with just connecting their system, whether it is I think Chilanga will talk about how Daimler Trucks is operating in terms of visibility, fleet management, and many of that. In chemical plants, how we are looking at assets, how the connectivity, IT, OT assets are providing. Same in Rockwell, they are having number of solutions to help us realize that connectivity. Even in that context itself, there is a significant business benefit organization can realize. And once you build a predictive capability, which is the next second inner circle you see across the three value stream of production, supply chain, and customer service, you get significant business value again. Radially, as you traverse in this chart, your value increases. And in the third ring of concentric ring of self-aware status, you are able to actually bring production, supply chain, many of these value streams together to realize greater value to your customers and as well as to your organization. I'm going to just quickly pause because of time constraints. I want to talk about one example and then we are going to kind of move into the panel discussions. Look at this example. It's a very interesting example. It's a company that makes onions in bulk production in Netherlands, and this company actually ships almost 60 to 70 containers of the large containers that you transport in a shipping vessel. 60 to 70 containers per week out of their ports in Netherlands to various stores. So it goes to Africa, it goes to Latin America, it traverses for many days across the sea to reach to the destination and to the stores. But remember, this is a perishable item. So what is happening here, the company that actually ships these onions, which is the shipping company, Maersk, actually have tracking system. And you have tracking systems today in, if you send a package in FedEx or in DHL or any package, we see that we are able to track. Even in Speed Post, we have now implemented the tracking system. So that has become quite a normal to have a tracking system in place. But what here they are doing is very interesting is inside these containers which carries these onions, They have monitoring systems like humidity, the freshness in terms of the temperature, in terms of no, the various other pressures and many things they measure in real time. And as it is getting transported through the ship across many days, all this data is real time collected, not by the shipping company, by the onion manufacturer itself in their office. So they know at every stage of this shipment what is the freshness of their onions, how much shelf life it is left, and where they should deliver it. So suppose if the shelf life is short, they will ship that to a nearest port and it will get consumed in the retail stores immediately within few days. If the shelf life is long, it goes to longer destinations like Latin America and they are able to consume that. So a shipping container system is connected now to this onion manufacturer systems. Both of them are able to track and able to manage their supply chain seamlessly and avoid actually wastage, avoid any before it becomes unusable. This kind of wastage is completely avoided using very well connected and intelligent systems. So there is number of such possibilities exist using this. So I'm going to kind of stop here and 1 minute. I will stop the sharing and come back to the panel. And start off with maybe the question to the panel. Maybe I would start off with Chulanga, if it is okay with you. We see this kind of connected systems across many industries that is allowing us that ability for automation, ability to take autonomous decisions. And I know in Daimler trucks, there is a lot of innovation happening around knowing your fleet, tracking them and basically knowing the location is fairly kind of becoming a hygiene today. But there is also a lot of new things happening on top of it, like you are using that tracking. If a truck is going somewhere in the highway, you know what kind of diagnostics, if there is any service request and many things. Can you kind of talk about what kind of new innovation that is happening in this area and how does it impact the supply chain and the trucking industry here in India?
So I think, see, when we look at connected vehicles, and especially the commercial vehicle segment, right, people are looking to have more and more smartness within the product itself. Now, what I mean by smartness is they want to generate revenue, but also provide an efficient service to their customers. If you look at fleet managers, they want the truck to have maximum uptime, and they also want to be able to provide this as an efficiency to their customers. So when you look at our trucks or even our buses, for example, I'll start with the buses and then move on to the trucks. Buses all are now connected, where passengers have a passenger app where they can actually locate where the bus is and step out of their house when the bus crosses a certain geofence. Yeah. So waiting time outside is minimized. And also there are a lot of inbuilt sort of entertainment facilities that are there for the passengers to enjoy while riding on the bus. Yeah? So this is one area where we are bringing in more customer centricity to buses. When you look at trucks, you rightly mentioned, for example, the trucks that are connected, we are collecting a large amount of CAN signals or diagnostic trouble codes that are coming out of the truck, where we are able to, well in advance, predict when a certain failure is going to happen, which we call as telediagnostics. This will ensure that, one, not only the customer is made aware of a certain failure, but it also helps us providing after sales to sort of, one, make our service centers or our dealerships ready to accept these trucks, bring in the parts that are necessary so that the turnaround time can be minimized. So the truck and the vehicle is becoming more and more smarter as time progresses, and we are able to provide these benefits to our customers. So connecting and automating is becoming not just a pivotal point, but it's become mandatory now. and a necessity as businesses evolve.
Zarit, probably if I can move over to Tata Chemicals, and I know Tata Chemical has been leading the adoption of cutting edge technologies in many of your operations. In fact, we had the opportunity to work in your new facility that has come up in Nellore. And I know that you are building digital lighthouse, your digital factory initiative for the nutraceutical business, remote sensing for your agri business, and many green supply chain initiatives to kind of break down your supply chains into many components, leveraging robotics, wagon loading, and many things. So can you give us a sense of how these technologies, this kind of connectivity, automation, autonomous systems, smart factories, how are they actually or kind of helping your business in terms of scaling your business as well as coming out with new business initiatives?
Thanks, Raghu. So I think it goes without saying, Raghu, that automation has for long been a very critical factor in process manufacturing industries, and especially in industries such as ours, which is bulk chemicals basically. But today I think we stand on the cusp of what is sure to be a revolution in automation. I think software and devices for chemical manufacturing plants have advanced way beyond simply controlling process parameters such as flow rate, temperature, pressure, etc. Today's technologies, given the ubiquity of sensors, the low cost of sensors, collect much more data from parts of the process than they've ever collected before. And advanced analytics then turns this data into actionable insights and information. And mobile devices today in the hands of employees gives them the insight they need to make decisions. It certainly optimizes operations and controls costs. And for us, I think very clearly, digital is no longer a choice. It's no longer a part of our strategy. It's core to and, in a sense, woven into our strategy and everything that we do. And to answer your question, I think for us at Tata Chemicals, it's about augmenting our core values. And any initiative that we take up in this space needs to answer 5 broad questions. Firstly, and this is extremely important for a chemical plant, as you would appreciate. Firstly, does it foster increased safety for our people, for our assets, and for the communities where we operate? Does it add to our vision of zero harm? And let me just give you some examples of what we mean by this. So at Mithapur, where we have our plant, our largest chemical operation today, we've put in place safety wearables, right? This would monitor not just where our employees are located, so it goes beyond just geotagging, and especially in remote locations where we have about 36,000 acres of land. But it goes beyond that into monitoring health, into sending out distress signals in the case of any unfortunate event, and it's all controlled remotely. The second question is, does it drive growth and catalyze innovation? Yeah. And you spoke a little bit, Raghu, about our interventions in agri remote sensing in our agri business. But we have now extended that into remote sensing for our vast acreage of salt pans and salt harvesting. So what's the right time to harvest? How much seawater do we throw? When do the pumps come on and off to move brine from one pan to the other? The third, and I think this cuts across many areas of operation, is does it drive performance and cost optimization? And this is really all about productivity, sustained profitability, the next step in excellence and culture of continuing or continuous improvement. And there, I think a lot of our IIoT initiatives are in place. So we are building, for example, digital twins across the various sections of our plant. And the kind of benefits that that brings in terms of not just optimization of performance, but in terms of predictive maintenance, predictive analytics, all of the good stuff that brings in. The fourth is, does it add to customer experience and engagement? And this, of course, is around obviously bringing in a 360-degree CRM process in place. And this is something that we found really valuable even as we speak, where your customers are unable to travel, you are unable to meet them. So we have today customers approving products, our new plants through virtual audits, through virtual walks. And I think a lot of this has now been put in place. And the fifth is, again, core to our survival and core to whatever we do, which is around sustainability and our environmental footprint. Do we have solutions in place that lessen our environmental load, that add to the circular economy? And here, for example, we have in our unit in the UK, we run a CHP plant, a utility generating steam and power. And today that draws on information from multiple sources, including social media, to predict demand and supply, and therefore to determine, do we push energy into the grid? Do we pull it out of the grid? Do we move from gas to some other fuel? And all that is happening in real time. So for us, really, the focus has changed from technology to impact. And I think what the events of these last few months and the health crisis has taught us and demonstrated to us is the pivot to digital is all pervading. I think it touches all age groups, all demographics. It's no longer the preserve of the millennials or the techies.
Correct.
The swift and very quick adoption of disruption is something that's been phenomenal. Sure. Today, we routinely, I think, interact with bots. We talk about paperless becoming
collaboration.
Normal. Yeah. So all of this today is something that we are taking for granted. And I think the new mantra will embrace things like remote, contactless, paperless, automation. So let me take a pause there. And
no, I think it's a great, there's a practical application of how all of these technologies are really coming and converging and realizing some of the 5 broad parameters we talked about. I will come back to you with some additional. Dilip, you have been in the midst of this automation as a business, right? Helping industries, bringing technologies, and you are the enabler or the vehicle for industries to adopt to smart manufacturing and autonomous systems, all of that. So what do you see in the context of India? Is this something which is very fancy or something which technology is not affordable, or no such expertise is not there? So how does India, in terms of India as a context, what is the need that exists for it, and how that people are adapting to it? Do you see some kind of torchbearers who are actually doing it fantastically?
Sure. So, Raghu, thank you so much, first of all, for having me on the panel. It's been a great discussion so far. I think the insights from the other 2 panelists are just simply outstanding. I would say to the question that you asked, in terms of, the context here in India, I would say, first of all, let's just pull the camera back. Globally, I think most countries are recognizing the importance of, attracting manufacturing-related investments. And everyone is recognizing that you've got to make manufacturing more competitive. And I think it's a foregone conclusion that if you have to gain manufacturing competitiveness, technology has a role to play. And as we've heard, through your comments and comments of other panelists, what these times have taught us is that technology is there. I mean, it's ready to meet whatever challenge is there. We're limited only by our imagination, right? So I just wanted to lay that out because, my own point of view is that there is a very core and central piece that technology has in helping solve this puzzle that we have. And what is the puzzle? Is you're caught between the two extremes, whereas on the one hand you have the consumer choices, which are consumers are spoiled for choice. They're becoming much more demanding. You're talking about scenarios where you don't know where the next competitor is going to pop up from, right? But at the same time, when you look at the raw material side of the equation, right, raw material and energy scarcity, the sustainability challenges, as a manufacturer, your choices are becoming harder and harder, right? So the game of manufacturing is becoming more complex, and you've got to really be very innovative, and you've got to leverage technology, to bring about that the competitiveness which I just alluded to. So that's my point of view. Now coming to the context in India, which is the question you asked me, I would say that first of all, there's a full spectrum, Raghu, that at least during our daily lives that we get to see. There are people who are absolutely at the cutting edge of embracing technology and weaving in technology along with their people and processes to lift the game up and make their enterprises more competitive and delight their customers more. But at the same time, like I said, it's a full spectrum, and there are people who are at varying parts of the journey, right? And there are fewer people who have made the journey, but there are many more who in the last few months, during the pandemic, have woken up to the fact that, listen, there's a greater sort of maturity towards, digital transformation, if I can put it in that manner. In India, we work, with a cross section of industries. There used to be a point in time, Raghu, that we used to attribute, adoption of automation and cutting edge technologies to industries like automotive, which were very global and very, very competitive. But that's no longer the case. I think, in the era of Industry 4.0, right, the pace of disruption, it has become, so compressed. The time between where, say, the leading sectors which adopt changes faster, and some of the other industries that tend to be a little bit more conservative because they operate in highly regulated environments, say, for example, life sciences, pharmaceuticals, we're finding that even they are stepping up and leveraging technology to bring about innovation and to carry out digital transformation. And I'm talking about customers here in India. We've had the opportunity to work not only with large marquee names, business leaders in India, but we are also finding that technology is turning out to be a great leveler, right? You could be an SME enterprise, but suddenly you're recognizing that leveraging, digital technologies and cloud-based platforms and the flexibility and the innovation that it affords to you, you can gain competitiveness, which can actually put you ahead of your larger competitors, who are having much greater inertia, for example, right? And there are great examples of that available in India, in mid-sized organizations, around automotive tier ones. There are people, we heard from Zarir, I'm finding that even chemical industry, the degree of innovation that is going on over there, is quite impressive. I would like to just cite one example. We've been talking to a customer. In fact, there was a call just this morning where, this is a very complex metals rolling mill application where the use case that they are actually exploring, and it's likely that they'll go live with it, in the coming few weeks, is predictive analytics, where they are amassing all the production data of the mill, and they are putting it through a model, and the model is enabling them to predict what is likely to happen 20 seconds later. Now, that information in the hands of their operating staff, they are thrilled with what they could do, because that can be game changing. And this is innovation that's going on right here in India. So I hope that example was useful. I can cite a few more if that's helpful, Raghu. But that's my point of view.
No, thanks, Dilip. I can see that you gave a very good map of every industry has the ability to adopt that technology. And also it does not differentiate that one doesn't have to be a large player for us to embrace the technology. Today, technology is consumed in the cloud, right? I can get a subscription-based services. Even if I have a very small line of production that I have, I can run some of these capabilities at fairly affordable cost. Whether it is cloud cost, whether it is, I think, application service, many of that are available on demand. And so it does not, I think I really carry your point that it does not really matter in terms of the size to make this to kind of adapt to these technologies. I think it's a great point.
Sure.
I'll probably go back to Chulanga. One quick question. Since you worked in Germany, you worked in Japan, at various countries of Daimler. Now in India, is there any uniqueness? For example, we have multiple, in the trucks business, right? You have trucks fleets going across the country for many needs of transportation. Yeah, very small scale operators are there, big operators, 3PLs are there. We have multiple languages, and the drivers are not as, everybody is having a different level of education and things like that. So if you take some of those diversity of those challenges and building some of the technology solutions, tracking and mobility and all of that, do you consider those aspects? If so, how do you actually manage that to cater to a market, uniqueness of this market?
So Raghu, see, when we are sort of developing new technologies or even structuring our products, we always do a market scan. We speak to our fleets, we speak to our customers, and try to understand what is it that they need. Because when you look at Daimler globally, in different markets, we have different segments and different products, all having different technologies that are fitted in on a common platform. So when it comes to India, what we've realized is the customer base that we have is very demanding of technology. India adopts technology a lot faster than what I have seen in other countries. And when it comes to India, again, everybody nowadays uses a smartphone, right? Managing your fleets, they want everything to be done within your smartphone. So when you look at our connected vehicles, we are providing them with all the insights they need within their smartphone, within an app. You can monitor your fuel efficiency. You can compare your fleet versus your sort of another fleet and see whether you can benchmark whether your drivers are performing below par or above. And based on that, there's a lot of fleet consulting services that we offer as well to optimize the utilization of their vehicles. Then when you look at, for example, route optimization, right? What is the best possible route that they need to take? These are sort of demands that are coming from India, where we've realized that the customers need this automation, need this kind of technology. Of course, from a product perspective, we also put in a lot of safety measures, right? On a global level, we have autonomous vehicles and electric vehicles. In India, we are not there yet because the Indian, road infrastructure as well as the infrastructure within the country does not sustain for that. But if you look at active brake assist, lane departure, reverse cameras, right? There's a lot of AI as well as intelligence that goes into the vehicles. And even though there's a vast variety of, like you said, in terms of education or literacy, we have seen that these drivers are able to adopt if we bring in smart simplicity, right? And that is where we spend a lot of time trying to figure out, irrespective of whether it's a large fleet owner or a single truck user, it doesn't really matter to us because we want to structure and cater to those needs. And we've seen the adoption is much faster, as I stated earlier. For us, what we are struggling with is how to keep up with the demands that are coming, right? The Indian market segment is demanding so much because they see the technologies that are out there and they are really demanding that they come here. And I'm very confident sooner rather than later, when you see the driver scarcity that is there in India, autonomous, at least to a certain degree, is not far-fetched. Yeah, in the next 10 to 12 years, you will see India moving towards that. And I think that is a very lucrative and sort of, a very prosperous future for the country.
Sure. I think a very interesting point, because sometimes the ability of our people in terms of adapting to technology is quite impressive actually. Sometimes in order to know the best smartphone feature, actually I ask my driver only. He will exactly tell you what you have to do, push here and that, this you can store here and all that. So and I can understand that the kind of demands that you will have from that people, hey, can we have this, can we have that kind of things, and very interesting. And it's really heartening to see that Daimler is bringing some of those technologies to the market here, and kind of localizing and providing that for the customers here. Thanks, Joanna. Zarit, one follow-up question on your articulation. It was a fantastic way you explained. Very quick question. I'm very interested. That what kind of technology you use for that salt harvesting? You talked about remote sensing for salt harvesting. Is it drone-based technology, or just for the benefit of all our thing, maybe you can give us some bits on that?
So in terms of the proof of concept, it's a mix, Jago, of satellite imagery, some little bit of drone-based, and sensor-based at the salt works itself. Where you measure, for example, the depth of the brine layer, its salinity, where the pumps are working, where they aren't. So we've put together a small little kind of a ecosystem there at our salt works. As I mentioned to you, these are at remote locations. They span vast areas. So it's a little bit challenging to get all of the right pieces in place. But I think we have something now that's workable and capable of scaling up.
Okay, excellent. No, I think the CIA has been telling that we have reached our time limit. But I think this topic is such a vast and very involved topic, and we will be doing gross injustice to this in 45 minutes. But having you all in joining this panel and giving that perspective, despite all the everyone working remotely, but sparing the time to be part of the panel, it's great. Thank you very much, Zarif. Thank you, Philip. I'm sure we will continue in these discussions in other forums as well. And I would now, I think automation and this kind of connectedness, every industry, it will happen, whether it is transportation to pharmaceuticals to chemicals to automotive and everywhere. And I think every car we sell today is talking about what next generation connectivity they bring. And that is also going to add more intelligence, more safety, more ability for us to reduce wastage and bring up the efficiencies. It's good for the human intelligence. Because of that connectivity, we have the Uber and Olas and everyone which has made this compute and the mobility platform very kind of good experience, consumer experience for everyone. I think that is something which definitely will continue to grow. I'm 100% sure. And we have that technology to be realized here in India. We have the product vendors, we have system integrators. I think it's important for organizations to look at it and embrace it very actively. Thank you very much, and safe and
thanks a lot, everyone.
Thanks everyone. Pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Thank you, speakers. Thank you for joining the session, and thank you, Mr. Raghu, for moderating the session as well. Thank you once again. We'll now move on to the next session for the day. The next session will be a roundtable on MSMEs in the perspective of opportunities, strengths, and challenges in the times of digital growth. And for this session, we have three eminent speakers who will be addressing us. And the session would be chaired by Mr. Sujeesh, who is the immediate past president of Ambattur Industrial Estate Manufacturers Association, and he is the proprietor of Srihari Industries. So I take the pleasure of introducing Mr. Sujeesh to the audience. Mr. Sujeesh is a graduate in mechanical engineering with a postgraduate diploma in business administration, and he has over 35 years of experience in the field of manufacturing automobile components. He runs a unit by the name of Srihari Industries at Ambattur Industrial Estate, Chennai, and he is the immediate past president of Ambattur Industrial Estate Manufacturers Association. So I would now request Mr. Sujeesh to take the session forward. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, good evening. And I think the late start was, we couldn't help that. I'm sorry for that. And I believe Mr. Gopal will be joining us a bit late. He's held up with another meeting. So we'll take him as he comes. And welcome to Mr. Haldar and Mr. Martin. To set the tempo for the meeting, we'd like to first discuss what are the challenges that we're facing and what are the immediate solutions that some of you, your customers or your business partners have provided. Can we start with Mr. Martin?
Pleasure to join. I hope I'm visible and audible. Thank you for the kind introduction. Now, our organization has been advising German-based medium-sized companies, what we call Mittelstand, which is a typical medium to also larger family business for the last few decades. And Make in India Mittelstand is a specific Government of India initiative to promote and encourage German, mostly family-held, closely held businesses to expand into the Indian market. So we have been following very closely and in a very detailed manner when we support these companies. We are the tax advisory partner for this program, which is an initiative by the Embassy of India, of course, in Berlin. So we have been following very closely the challenges and business experiences of these businesses. Now, what we are seeing clearly is when it comes to the interface between doing business in India and digitization, that the past developments, especially in also the format of this conference as we see it today, have shown a significant change in character and a significant moving in digital, also in this segment of the business. Now, these businesses which we see are very typical and very technology focused, but very in a lot of ways very traditional. They are not in a broad-based digital economy. They are usually in very traditional fields: automotive, engineering, machine tools, engineering advisory, as well as engineering of complex installations, complex large installations. So for those, there is a conservative hands-on approach or prevalent over the last decades, which had to change radically in the new situation which we are finding ourselves in the COVID-19 scenario. So the overcoming these challenges was a hardware and a cultural issue, and for reaching out to the existing numerous contacts in the Indian market, these companies are following required a lot of adaptation. Something which some of the smaller organizations have it forced them to adapt quite rapidly. We found that in the practical experience, the India and Germany spirit of doing business was very positive, because there is a big, the Indian counterparts are very much used to overcoming logistical and technical difficulties. And the German partners were willing to follow along, be very creative in moving everything online when it comes to consultation, trying to build trust also over the distance without meeting in person, and also moving their concepts, trying to achieve the high-tech solutions still while working remote and while bridging that gap by using technology platforms to interchange. In theory, all of this has always been available on these platforms, but the cultural shift to using the platforms for this type of company I'm talking about here was a big shift also for technology-oriented companies in Europe, Germany, and they are struggling very hard and working very hard, and a lot of them very successfully in adapting this to this scenario. So in that sense, digitization has, in the past months, as stressful as they are for everyone, have been an eye-opener in this particular business vertical.
Yeah, just a few clarifications on your address. See, we had this Make in India initiative in Hanover, I think about 4 years back. And what was the trade-off been after? We have been traditionally having good businesses from Germany here, like Bosch, ZF, to name a few. They have been here, have had a long presence here, particularly in the automotive segment. Has there been any other investment which has come into India after this push by the Indian government of Make in India? That is number one. And I find a lot of German companies using the synergy of the software capability of India, and particularly when SAP, though the SAP is a German product, most of the SAP engineers are Indians. And how well are we integrating it, and how do you look at the future, especially with a lot of disruptive technologies coming in, particularly e-vehicles and hydrogen vehicles? How do you see things moving forward?
Thank you. Yes. So a range of issues, and I'm coming to your first part of your question. We are very pleased to see that the German investment coming in, facilitated by the Make in India initiative and the Make in India advisory program, as well as via other channels which are going in parallel. We see a very, very significant and very focused approach. We see, especially also during the last 6 months, 12 months, German medium-sized companies which are names which will not automatically be household names like the ones you mentioned, which are of course the flagship and which are the shining beacon which everyone follows. And there are a lot of names which are leaders in their technology fields, but which are not so well-known brands, who have significantly either entered India or, and that's also very significant, are expanding their presence in India in a big way. And by a big way, I mean upgrading their existing presence, which may have been limited for sales and services, to a manufacturing presence, which of course Make in India is all about. And that we see very successfully. So the investment, which is really monitored via this program, is several hundred million euros volume, typically spread out over a number of projects where each of them may be a 10 to 20 million euro volume, which by itself that cannot be compared to some of the mega investments which you read in the paper, but taken together, and that's what these type of companies are about, taken together, have a significant spread out in various regions of India, but we see here indeed Tamil Nadu in a very, very strong position. And also which have each a smaller size in comparison, but in taking in total an amount to a very, very significant presence. So we are very, and putting India on the map via the Make in India initiative was really one of the master strokes here of industrial policy, because the fit and the requirement to look at India as a market was very, very, very good and was well received. The perception of the elephant in the room, there is always the question for a company to move, also have investments in China. How do they see things? How do they measure up? How do they compare what we see? And we also have, I have colleagues who are advising the China corridor. I just got off a call with them. They are seeing a movement away from companies putting all their eggs into one basket. They see this as a huge diversification. And companies take that very seriously, what they're experiencing, and from various aspects in this market. And this has been a trend over the years. So this initiative, which was shown in Hanover Fair, where we are also a part of the knowledge program, we see a big positive trend coming here. Now, as to the other parts of the questions, to the extent I can still recall, we see the new technologies of disruptive technologies of transportation of components in the alternative fuels in other propulsion of cars and vehicles. We see that Germany not only has some large manufacturers who sometimes have also been a bit slower in adapting. There are a lot of, again, those smaller companies who manage components, who, for example, manage the hardware for charging stations, who manufacture the software for charging stations for electrical vehicles, who manage some component for battery manufacturing. So who are now finding their technology being in demand, and they are very sensitive to the opportunity and open to the opportunities in the Indian market. The challenge for those companies obviously is to make that first step, to move into the market, get that first headline project, which you can use as a reference for future projects. Because obviously, a lot of companies, the question would be, you're not a well-known brand, so what can you show for yourself? What have you achieved already in India? Does your technology work in the Indian framework? Technology, conditions, pricing, and once you've achieved that big step, it's a problem almost to fulfill the demand, because there is so much opportunities. The first step, however, we see requires a lot of work and patience, which these companies then have to bring to the table to get the first access to the market.
Thank you. We'll come back to you a bit later. We have with us now Dr. Gopal, who's 1992 IAS batch officer of the Tamil Nadu cadre, and he is currently the principal secretary to the Government, Animal Husbandry, Dairying and the Fisheries Department, and is also holding the full additional charge of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises Department. He has been empaneled to additional secretary rank level at the Government of India. He did his graduation in medicine from Osmania Medical College, Hyderabad. He has worked in various departments and sectors in state and at the center. He has also worked in UNICEF India Country Office at New Delhi on UN deputation. He worked as chairman of Tobacco Board, Development Commissioner Handicrafts at the Government of India. In the state government, he has worked in various capacities as district collector, Virudhunagar and Villupuram, managing director for organizations such as Tamil Nadu Civil Supplies Corporation, Chennai Metro Water and Sewerage Board, Tamil Nadu Medical Services Corporation, Tamil Nadu Women Development Corporation, and also to Secretary of Government, Social Welfare and Noon Mill Program Department. He has served in assignments in the Chennai Corporation, Municipal Administration and Water Supply Department, Home Department, Revenue Department, and also worked as Commissioner, Town Panchayats, apart from other assignments. And he has received the following awards and recognitions: the Green Award from the Government of Tamil Nadu for his contribution as District Collector in Environmental Protection and Rainwater Harvesting Systems in Virudhunagar District, Dr. Malcolm Adisheshaya Emerald Jubilee Award by the State Resource Center, Chennai, Ministry of Human Resources and Development, Government of India, for his efforts in child labor elimination in Shivakashi Industrial Area, Tamil Nadu, got a Golden Leaf Award in USA during 2014 for his contribution for tobacco farmers' welfare in the industry through e-auction systems, and he was conferred with the Participant Popularity Award, selected by fellow peers of IAS in Seoul by the Korean Development Institute during his IAS Phase 4 training program. And he has keen interest in development activities, infrastructure activities, export promotion, and financial linkages and growth-oriented projects. And in my personal interaction with him, I found him extremely dynamic and a person who acts immediately even before a request is put forward. May I now request Dr. Gopal to address the gathering, please?
Good evening to all of you, and Thank you very much for this opportunity. I think CII Connect 2020 is really connecting everybody. So I sincerely thank CII for this initiative in a testing time like this. And but I'm sure, I mean, as per my limited interaction with the CII, the office bearers, as well as all their, the partner members and at various places, I think we get a lot of confidence after seeing and you bring up issues to the notice of the government. So government obviously would give a lot of importance to the CII's suggestions, remarks, as well as the feedback. So a real good thing is that you may be aware that we are making a lot of visits to the districts these days. Honorable Chief Minister visits visits the districts, and during his visits, his secretary and myself and a couple of our senior colleagues would always accompany him, basically to interact with the industry representatives from MSME, from major industries. We try to get as much feedback as possible to just know what is happening at the field level. So basically, to understand the micro level problems relating to the COVID, how the COVID is impacting the industry, and what exactly needs to be done, what needs to be the additional efforts from our side. So I'm sure, I think in that way, we are trying to cover all the districts, trying to get a good feedback from districts, and trying to address estate-related problems. It may be a SIPCOT industrial estate problem, or a SIDCO industrial estate problem, or TANSI-related problems, or industrial chamber-related problems. So, but anyway, I'm sure today's, I think the topic is, I would say, very, very relevant again for MSMEs from the digital perspective. So in the present era of focusing on digital growth, the MSMEs also have immense potential in tapping the opportunities based on their inherent strengths. Besides, in context of the advocating the Atmanirbhar by the Honorable Prime Minister of India, the digital inclusion of MSMEs is crucial for the important role they play in supporting the economic growth, innovating employment, and reducing the informality, which makes them perfect examples of self-reliance or Atmanirbhar. The digital transformation by the MSMEs has traditionally a lag behind the expected curve and has to improve a lot for purpose of driving a digital adoption. The majority of MSMEs do not use electronic payments and are excluded from digital economy. In the current pandemic, consumers are increasingly making purchases online, you are well aware. For example, as it has been observed that 49% of the Indian consumers are planning to make more purchases online. It has become a critical for MSMEs to adopt and cater to the shifts in the transactional behaviors. Further, as MSMEs are observed to be increasing their sales after they start to accept digital payments, MSMEs also benefit from automated reconciliation, lower transaction disputes, and improved business efficiency. Digital transformation is not just using apps or social media. It has to be aligned to the business goals and business processes. The unprecedented changes that have taken place in the wake of COVID-19 are throwing up compelling reasons and opportunities for MSME segment to also rethink their customer requirements and their business models. The MSME segment have to embrace digital transformation, which are crucial, especially in the context of COVID-19 and the resultant business climate. The first area of focus would be to identify new customers, as existing customers may be cash-strapped, may have reduced demand, or may have simply perished on account of COVID crisis. Second, adopting the digital journey can ensure the existing customers are serviced effectively, thus leading to forming of new opportunities. Several customers are seeking discounts and are renegotiating contracts due to constraints faced, and will have to choose whom to work within the demand challenged scenario. Businesses that can continue to retain attention of the customers and use digital means to service them via frequent communications, sharing analysis of the outcomes from previous engagements, and providing proactive examples of how they could go to the extra mile to service them using digital channels without enhanced cost would have a head start in the next phase of business. Third, streamlining the supply chain. Almost all industries are facing the challenges due to broken supply chains and the bottlenecks thereof at multiple stages. The fourth reason is to manage its people and their motivation. Virtual offices and remote working are here to stay. This is the right time to create a digital frameworks to foster higher levels of employee engagement through collaboration, upskilling, and building a bridge between the roles and the new competencies required, thus establishing a new benchmarks in productivity. The rapid spread of digital technology is disrupting the production and trade, generating both opportunities and challenges for sustainable development. The capabilities of digital networks and devices are much greater today, and many new technologies and services have to be developed, deployed, and become pervasive. Digital technologies and platforms can reduce transaction costs for businesses and facilitate access to new customers, both in domestic and foreign markets. Digitalization also plays a central role in extending the reach and impact of frontier technologies, many of which show great potential to enable the achievement of the sustainable development goals. And as you know well, the Industry 4.0, the artificial intelligence, big data, cloud computing, machine learning, and algorithmic decision making are all powerful instruments of change. In India, the adoption of Industry 4.0 is at a nascent stage owing to challenges such as the need for high investment outlay, inadequate know-how, and lack of infrastructure and lack of adequate cyber security norms. However, with the benefits such as cost reduction, higher efficiencies, safer factories, and faster speed to market, Industry 4.0 can provide the country's manufacturing sector the much needed platform to stay competitive in the global market. With a large manufacturing base, a significant IT industry, India is in a unique position to fully harness the potential of Industry 4.0, provided there is a strong governing force in orchestrating the ecosystem and bringing these individual components together. Overall, the widespread adoption of Industry 4.0 would require collaborative efforts of industry associations like CII, and these associations can take initiative to identify the technological developments, find the infrastructure, and assess impact on sectors, and plan the workforce upskilling roadmap. The association could also work closely with the government to facilitate faster adoption of 4.0. Thus, it is imperative to communicate the ideas that players in government and corporate sector will profit most if an initiative of Industry 4.0 goes together. By adopting Industry 4.0, we will have a major competitive advantage over the global competitors in economy. But first and foremost, we need to have the essence of speed in order to capture this opportunity and to achieve our goal. I sincerely thank the CII Tamil Nadu chapter for providing me this opportunity, and especially its office bearers. and also other the members. And wish you a good luck. So looking forward for many more such occasions, and looking forward to see you all, maybe, very soon. Once I think this or not, becomes a down as well as a plateau. So that is, reduction of the number of cases of, the corona. So we are really looking forward to, bring back the normalcy into the overall, the activities, operations, and the force as well as the growth. So thank you very much for this opportunity, sincerely. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Do stay with us, sir, for the rest of the session. It was a pleasure listening to you. And yes, challenges is something we always live with and look forward to also, particularly when there are others of like you to help us out at every stage. Your dynamism is required and your support is continuously required for us to come out of the situation. Yes, we are coming back to normalcy pretty quickly. And we did have the fears when on September 1, the transportation was opened up. We thought the numbers would go up. And luckily for us, the numbers have remained the same. So we are just looking forward for the opportunity to grow further. And every dip always sees an growth which comes in at a much faster pace. So we're just looking forward for that. Yes, of course, there are challenges, and it is how we meet the challenges that makes us different. And I'm sure with your support, Tamil Nadu will bounce back very fast. Thank you, sir. Please do stay back with us, sir.
Yeah, thank you. All the best. Yeah.
Can I engage Mr. Haldar now? Mr. Haldar, Facebook as a marketing medium has been quite a revelation. You were telling me the other day about a chair manufacturer in Singapore tapping the global market. And if you look at the automotive segment too, the Ford, when they launched a recent off-road vehicle Bronco, they took to digital marketing, and I believe though it is costing about $30,000 to $40,000 per vehicle, which is a very high-end vehicle, and with the present trend of the pandemic, they are booked for almost 2 years. So that is the power of digital marketing. And I would like you to share with us some of the case studies or some of the success stories of middle and even the larger enterprises who have been able to leverage Facebook as a marketing media so that others can latch on to it and learn and get benefit. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Narayanan. Yeah, and thank you to CII for inviting to this prestigious panel. It's our privilege. So I don't think I need to spend time introducing Facebook. Most listeners are aware of the platforms that comprise what we call the Facebook family of apps and services. Which are obviously Facebook, as well as Instagram, and as well as WhatsApp, which are the three most commonly used platforms that we support. We estimate that around 180 million small businesses are using at least one of these platforms on at least once a month. So it's one of the largest business platforms in the world today, and it's evenly spread across the world. So it's a very global platform. What businesses typically do on these platforms are three things. I divide into three buckets. The first bucket is presence. It is the digital equivalent of opening a shop or putting up a sign on the street or having a presence that can easily be found. When you are a customer and you come across the name of a business or you're researching something you want to buy, whether it's a low value consumer good or if it's a high value good, physical good or service, people tend to look it up online and see that it's a legitimate business and what kind of response it has. And the Facebook platforms usually are quite popular among a very wide variety of businesses to have a presence. And this could be an Instagram page or a Facebook page, and even these days a lot of businesses use like the WhatsApp, the business app to have a presence, and we see a lot of businesses using this. And if I quickly talk about the pandemic for a moment, in the pandemic we're seeing a lot more businesses, a lot more than usual, adopt these platforms. The simplest way for and I will go like to the other extreme of like micro business, like this, imagine a corner shop in a neighborhood that is, under like physical distancing norms or some form of lockdown. And they still need to survive and operate their business. And the way they do is they have a presence on WhatsApp. They take orders on WhatsApp, and they use delivery or some equivalent service to send the physical good to their customers. And this is like a very simple and extreme example of a micro business. And so it's a great set of platforms to have a presence on. And so we are seeing a lot of businesses, who have resisted the urge to go digital in the past. Now they're forced by the circumstances to build a presence and so that customers can interact with them. The second bucket of things that our businesses on our platforms use is what I call connecting with customers. So presence is one aspect, but the Facebook platforms enable businesses to have a conversation with their customers. A back and forth, a sharing of ideas, taking inquiries. This can be in the form of one-to-many sharing, on a business page or an Instagram profile, or it can be in the form of one-on-one communication, using messaging, like I said. I myself have used a lot of businesses. I live in Singapore, and a lot of businesses are taking their orders over WhatsApp right now, and transacting using digital payments, something that the Honorable Principal Secretary mentioned. So this is happening faster and faster, as some of it is, there is no choice. We have to adopt this fast. So connecting with customers is the second bucket. And I'll give a specific example of a bookstore. Again, not a huge business, but you can imagine that in a pandemic, they are completely shut down. Nobody's going to a bookstore to purchase. And the example I have is a store called B Books out of Kolkata. The founder, Miss Isha Chatterjee, she obviously had to shut down her shop, but she used Facebook groups to keep a conversation alive with her, frequent customers. She would have storytelling sessions. She would invite authors, in panels such as this, and keep the conversation alive with their customers. And she made a lot of videos. She was live. She would take questions from, because a lot of people are homebound, and so their reading has actually gone up. That's the interesting thing, and that's something that she said. And so it was interesting that she used these platforms to maintain her business, keep the conversation, and even take orders. And the last bucket is what I would say is promotions, wherein once you get past the presence and connection, obviously, like every business needs to acquire more customers, bring back return customers, and Facebook platforms give the ability to run advertisements and are very targeted advertisements. So you only pick a certain demographic or a certain geography or a certain set of interests to go after. It's specific communication, and businesses use this a lot. We have, like I mentioned earlier, we have 180 million businesses globally on our platforms, and out of these, 9 million businesses actually spend money with us. Because they find it useful and valuable, and they get a return on this sort of investment. So I'll close. These are three buckets how businesses are using. I'll close with yet another example, and actually two examples. One is like a craft center from Rajasthan, Bharatpur. Such businesses or enterprises exist all over our country, where somebody gathers a few craftsmen in a series of villages and commissions some work. With the pandemic, this sort of business has also suffered. But what this business did, their name is Kirti Craft, based in Bharatpur, Rajasthan. They used all the craftsmen that they had access to start making masks, and they would make handcrafted masks, and they sell it. They sell it all over the country, and they're still able to earn an income and pay their artisans. So again, it's like a social enterprise that has managed to move from traditional crafts to start making masks, and they're able to I won't say they're minting money, but they're definitely able to survive through this sort of period. And lastly, I'll mention the example you alluded to earlier, which is more in the manufacturing space, because I understand we have a lot of listeners from manufacturing. One of the big trends we are seeing is for B2B businesses to go direct to customer. So, the example I mentioned is called Secret Labs. They're a chair making company out of Singapore. They're a very niche company that will make very specialized chairs. And, they, over the last few years, they've used Facebook to really reach their end customer instead of selling to offices or like enterprises. They sell directly to the customer. They take orders via their e-commerce website. They obviously drive advertisements over Facebook and other digital platforms. And over time, their business is almost exclusively direct to customer now, wherein they take orders, and they do this around the world. So even though they're based in Singapore and their manufacturing is in Singapore and Malaysia, it does not limit them. They actually have customers with a very global footprint, and they run different campaigns in different languages for different customer segments in different parts of the world. And they use the global trade system to send their chair over. It's a slightly high-end chair, but it's really comfortable, good for like long hours, which a lot of people. And after the pandemic, they're one of the few businesses that have seen their fortunes shift towards the positive, because a lot of people now realize that they're working from home and they need a chair that is more comfortable than the occasional use chair they typically have. So I'll stop there, but would love to listen to what other questions you might have.
Thank you, Haldar. I'll come back to you a bit later. Let me go to Mr. Martin. Mr. Martin, I have a few questions to you. Yeah. The Industry 4 allows you to remote control your factory operations. So these are one of the benefits of having Industry 4 system. You have complete control over the processes written in a remote place, and everything can be stored on the cloud. And you can micromanage the operations of the factory sitting miles and miles away. Germany, being a technology innovator and having challenges on resources available within Germany, do you look that this can be leveraged to use the space and talent available in India to run factories in India for products that are required in Germany? Of course, a local market is also required, but do you think there will be more focus on this, that you will be looking at, designing and controlling rather than manufacturing, and shift the manufacturing to a place where it can be done more economically?
Thank you for this question. It touches upon a few very central parts of where German companies are very excited in looking at leveraging the expertise, looking at combining the hardware, the hardcore manufacturing, and the digitization. At a bigger level, we see that there are these show factories with phenomenal productivity increases by, for example, by Siemens. They have their flagship factory is actually 45 minutes away from where I am sitting at the moment in Germany, which is constant. They have their own visitor program because there are so many international visitors, including from India, for visiting getting the first-hand impression of this factory, which is a factory in the field is a manufacturing unit of the Siemens Group in a rather provincial setting, which is again typical for Germany. It's really out away from a big center. It's a few hours away from Munich, for example, but it is all the technology they have available, they are putting in there. And now scaling this down to medium-sized companies is a very exciting task, because obviously these companies do not have their backbone infrastructure, and when it comes to IT, they have their IT systems, but not in a scalable way, which this definitely requires. Looking at the bridge between Germany and India, we see a lot of interest in utilizing the phenomenal talent base which is available in India in the digital field, and the importance of digitization increasing. So while we are seeing a trend that the number of expatriate workers from Germany going to India monitoring operations is actually going down, we see the trend in the other direction, that companies have operations in India, identify talent, and also request talent to be posted into the head office in the field of software engineering, IT, digitization, digital know-how, digital processes, because there are resources available which are much more difficult to be available in Europe. This, of course, builds a bridge which works in both directions, because that builds trust in both directions and enables these companies to make very massive decisions for locating manufacturing into India, and also for utilizing the know-how that is so widely available in India, making it fit for them. It is a very individual solution for each of these smaller companies. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Every company has their own history, setups, and framework, but then we see the example, especially of know-how exchange in both, which is much more happening in both directions now than when I compare it to a few years ago. For example, when the Make in India initiative was launched, this was also the early stage of Industry 4.0. Now we have reached a much more mature stage, and adapting it to the need of the location is going to be very important. And what will work maybe very nicely and look very nice in a setting in Germany may not work one-to-one in your factory in India. It is the successful companies we see adapt in a big way and do not take things as they don't copy-paste. They adapt in a very, very massive way also to the requirements, the environment, and to the framework conditions. Those are the companies who leverage this best. It's a natural fit. Coming back to the starting point of your question, I see it as a natural fit. The sophisticated manufacturing with the digitization and the digitization know-how available with the Indian team members, which we see everywhere for the medium-sized companies. So you're raising a very central point, which will take us into the future for quite a while, for the next years to come. And we are there only at the beginning of a trend, of a massive trend.
Mr. Sujit?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Yeah, quite impressed, remarks from Mr. Martin. And I think Industry 4 is going to be our real challenge. I think we are really push it. And we need a massive campaign. So already we started a lot of sensitization programs, how we can carry forward with the mandate of, the Industry 4. So I think, sure, at least if not small or micro, at least the medium enterprises as well as the, the larger industries are definitely interested in, going for Industry 4. I'm sure that's the need of the hour. And that's going to solve, I think, many issues. In fact, sometimes we keep hearing about, some even owners not able to go to the work site to see the processes and all. I'm sure, I think now everybody is operating from home. Why not? They operate, entire industrial process from home itself. This is precisely, I think, we are looking forward. So, and precisely, and this is the only reason why the MSME department wants to have a very nice collaboration with, the IT department here. So, information and, the information technology as well as other related departments here in Tamil Nadu. So, I'm sure combinedly, with the help of, people like Mr. Martin and, maybe various other organizations involved in Industry 4, and with your collaborations, I mean, with the CII's, active involvement, I think definitely we can make it as an important parameter. And I think that's going to really help the entire industry. So therefore, whatever, industry wants us to do to take it forward, we are there to help. And that's precisely what I think myself and Mr. Hansraj Verma. So, sir is, of course, he also, I think, really wants to put this, push this, the digital transformation concept. So, and we are in favor of, digital, both, push of digital transformation or digital push, as well as the, pushing this entire industry four concepts. So I'm sure, I think we'll work together, and we'll see the results also maybe over a year or 1.5 year or 2 years or whatever. I'm sure it's going to be long battle. You have to sensitize all your stakeholders, and few people may say, few industrial partners may say, why not? So I'm sure. So why we should not do that? So we'll do that. We'll go ahead. So thank you very much. I mean, quite impressive interaction. Mr. Haldar was talking about some experiment, and but I really missed, I think, much of this, the processes today. So that's how I think, as a bureaucrats, we sometimes don't find too much time to. Anyway, please go ahead, and really quite impressed. Thank you very much.
Sir, before you leave, I'd like to ask Martin if there is any particular challenge that the MSMEs in Germany who want to come to Tamil Nadu are facing, and which needs immediate redressal. So Martin, if there's anything that you want to the government, you have the right person right on your screen.
Thank you so much. I think we are seeing so much progress by being able to reach out to organizations like this group here, where the stakeholders are available. Obviously, for a foreign investor, there are always the challenges of getting the paperwork processed in a predictable way, in a way which works in a time-bound manner. Everybody's willing to do the paperwork. It is a question of having a predictable process. So there, having a chance to escalate when it gets tricky, difficult, when it comes to land acquisitions, connectivity of connecting the supplies, electricity, water, utilities, all these things. I think it comes to the local level, and there we are very impressed that the local state governments take this keen interest and also take it seriously if it's a small investment. I think I would really want to, it will not be the size of an Apple iPhone factory. It will be, it will be 5% of that, 10%. But if you take 10 of those, that's a very good cluster you're getting and very resilient. Because if 2 are not doing well, the other 8 will. And so I would also encourage the spirit of taking the seemingly small investment as a very positive sign, because taken together they're big. So sometimes we feel it's easier if you want to create 5,000 jobs than if you want to create 100. So that would be my request, to take that. For these companies, it's still a big step. So take them in a friendly way, which we are seeing, of course. And whenever we have the chance, we know we get all the facilitation help we need. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you. Best wishes. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. And now I'd like to engage Mr. Haldar. Mr. Haldar, see, there are a lot of changes that are taking place on the automotive segment too, particularly e-vehicles, where the battery is supplied by an ex-supplier, the drive motor by someone else. So anybody, like you had this computer assemblers, put into a situation where a manufacturer of an e-vehicle will only be an assembler, where he sources the battery from someone, the steering from someone, and he just puts together. And I hope that there will be changes in laws also with regard to the safety and other things which enables such a thing to happen. And in such a change scenario, I think Facebook will be a fantastic medium for taking up such challenges. Have you had any kind of a case study or a predictive kind of a study about the way the trend of certain businesses are going to change and how Facebook is gearing up for that? Or what is it that these people will have to do to gear up to meet these challenges?
Yeah. So before I talk about Facebook, I'll talk about, you mentioned computer assemblers, which as you can think of, the industry that really grew 15 years ago. And the most famous business brand of that time was Intel, and they were not really a consumer brand in the sense, not a lot of us would go to a shop and buy an Intel processor. We would usually buy a computer, but the marketing was centered around the fact that people would want a computer that had that component. So even though they were a component maker, and they were essentially a supplier, they spent a lot of money to connect to the customer the point that, if you were buying a computer 15 or 20 years ago, you would want one which had that microprocessor. And, if I draw that parallel to today's world and example you mentioned, whereas platforms become more open for things like, electric vehicles, customers want certain components. They want a XYZ car, but they would want a battery from a well-known manufacturer. And so in that environment, I think a lot of businesses should reach out and connect with their customers. And Facebook, the platforms provide a great way to connect with customers. Like it can have you can set up a page, you can have a conversation, you can take feedback, you can even like showcase things about your company that you wouldn't usually in an advertisement, like the manufacturing process, the quality control process, and these kind of things, which, especially in a new industry, people want to know how these things are made, that they are made with care and with like high degree of quality. And so, like a lot of businesses use Facebook to showcase like the making of, which is not something you would put in an advertisement, but it's something you would put to your followers. So, and Facebook pages or Instagram pages are perfect for this sort of thing, where you've already got that captive audience. They have chosen to follow you, so they have a basic amount of interest in the business. And so, the encouragement to these kind of manufacturers is to have the presence. I totally acknowledge that it is an effort required to maintain their presence and have the conversation, but the effort will pay off. It's equivalent to building a brand in a long period of time. So that's my response. I think this is a new area, and as these new component manufacturers get established, it's a great time to build that brand. Well before you get to a point where you want sales. So brands are built over a longer period of time.
Yeah, Mr. Halda, I see every product satisfy every customer.
Yeah.
So there are some people with the best products. Some people always have some complaint, and about the recent problems that Facebook has been facing in certain segments because of the negative comments certain people put. So this can be used again in a negative fashion too. So what are the safeguards that you propose to bring into Facebook to protect the interests of the advertiser or the product manufacturer against such unwarranted or unsubstantiated negative feedback?
Yeah, it's something we take very seriously, and one of the advantages of targeted marketing is you target certain customers. It's not like broad-based marketing, and so we are constantly investing in more like review of content. So our content review goes through multiple processes where goes through an automated review, and then manually a sample of content is reviewed and taken down quickly. The size of growth and the size of humanity can sometimes be hard to keep up with, which is where most of the challenges come from. But the company is investing heavily into managing the quality of content that stays on the platform. And when it comes to advertisers and like businesses that are using the platform, we do give the business the ability to manage most of the content on their page and the conversation. So they are mostly in control over the conversations on their page. And businesses also, we advise them, businesses that have account managers in the company, they get a lot of advice on how to ensure that the targeting is such that it is not seen next to the kind of content that the business does not want to be associated with. So, it boils down to the use of the targeting tools in a way, from the business's perspective, versus like, just advertising to all. So that's the two things. On the company side, we are investing heavily to take down content that is not the kind of content we want on a platform or is not in line with like local regulations. And on the advertiser side, we advise them actively to use the tools that they provide to manage their presence better.
And I had wanted to ask you another question to you about people switching over to e-marketing platforms. Do you find the trend all across the globe to be uniform, or are there certain pockets in the world which are adapting faster and certain pockets which are still relying on the age-old traditional way of doing business?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we see like, of course, the whole world is adopting, but there's definitely what, I would say emerging economies and developing economies are adapting faster, simply because they are not entrenched in the old models And I'm referring to like even like let's say Amazon has a slightly older model, wherein you need a credit card and to pay, like, which is not common in most developing economies. So what we're seeing is new technologies, and this was mentioned a couple of times in today's panel, the previous panel as well, is emerging markets take on new technologies faster because they don't have the baggage of old technologies. And there's a whole bunch of like really like developing countries. The example is often like a lot of countries who adopted mobile phones much later don't have landlines. Like Bangladesh is an oft-cited example because they didn't have the baggage of dealing with landlines. They just jumped into mobile phones. So the similar thing we're seeing with e-commerce, where developing economies like even India, businesses, even small businesses, adapting much faster because they are more flexible, they're more nimble. And the other trend we see is smaller businesses are adapting faster because they're more agile, they are more nimble, and they don't have large department to shut down or refocus. They are able to like quickly pivot to a newer model of transaction, whether it's taking orders over messaging and using digital payments, or using like marketplace platforms. And so we're seeing like most emerging markets, and India is definitely one of them, but a lot of Southeast Asia as well, and the Pacific Ring, China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, are adapting much faster than like developed countries like the West or Australia. That's the trend we see.
All right, Mr. Halda, thank you. Any parting remark that you'd like to make? No,
thank you for having us. I hope the small businesses that are listening in today, find use in the things we said, and are able to digitize and adapt faster to the circumstances. And like the Honorable Principal Secretary said, I hope we are able to come back to normalcy soon. So I'm sure everybody desires that.
It's in our hands. We'll have to take up the challenge head on. And I'd like to address Mr. Martin. Mr. Martin, yes, what you said are the challenges that every industry here faces. I could only empathize with you. Yes, we all face the same challenges. Now that you are only facing the difficulty that you had mentioned, I could easily relate to it because ours is a very populous country and a democratic country with a lot of political parties, with a lot of people with political ambitions. So there are challenges, and we will definitely overcome them. And as CII and even AIMA, we are bodies which help tide over such situations. You can always come to us or even write to CII whenever there's such an issue, because business should not suffer at any cost. We need to develop our infrastructure. We need to work on our synergies. We need to build our business enterprises, and we need to provide employment opportunities to everybody, irrespective of the region or the country. Everyone has to survive. Everyone has to improve his lifestyle. Everyone has to move forward in life and achieve what he aspires. And any parting shots from you, Mr. Martin?
It was always impressive to interact with your team and your organization. So we feel very much at home. Also coming to this part of India, particularly, I myself have been coming in and out of India the past 15 years. I've seen a lot of development where we are clearly moving in this direction that we are very comfortable helping building that bridge between, and we really thank you for all the efforts that are being made at the institution side. And we, of course, appreciate a lot of initiatives, and we see a momentum which is being tested really at the moment in these times. But then when you put something to the test, you see what the momentum really is like. And what we see is when we have the chance to work together, we see the momentum goes on. So we also feel that we are on the right track here and strive for making it better. And we feel by a lot of smaller steps, we can achieve a long journey. And that is in our case, the Germany-India journey, which is again has a long past, but a great future also. So thanks to all of you, and thanks to your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin, and thank you, Mr. Halda. Thank you for your time. And I think I overshot the meeting time by about 10 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Ruben, and thank you, CIA, for the wonderful opportunity. Together, we will work things out, and together we'll make our country strong. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you all speakers, and thank you, Mr. Sujesh, for moderating the session wonderfully. So thank you once again for all the speakers who have joined for the session today. So with this session, we come to the end of the day 3 of the Connect 2020 proceedings. And I wish to thank all the audience for joining via live stream and for participating directly. And with this, we conclude the session of the day 3. And I would like to thank once again all of you once again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
This pandemic is showing how interconnected and interdependent we all are. And one HCL is showing how one person and many of us can make a difference.
It's a feeling of togetherness, brotherhood, stepping up to the occasion and standing for those who are in need and need support from us.
One ACL is about staying inspired and increased motivation while adjusting to the new normal.
We stand together as HCLites, and not just for the fellow HCLites, but also for our community, also for our nation.
As we work through these uncertain times of COVID-19, I take pride in the fact that I work for an organization who makes it clear that its priorities are its people, its clients, and then being a good global citizen. And HCL really, with one HCL, encapsulates all of this.
And we're coming out stronger as true communities. One HCL means we are all in this together.
We are one HCL, divided by geographies, but united by networking. We cope with COVID-19 efficiently and build our team and start working from home.
Showing all the stories of our HCL employees who have come an extra mile to support their projects, to support their teams, and to support the society. Really hats off to all of them, and really thanks to HCL for bringing all the stories into the limelight, so that these stories will inspire others, and they will make many more champions.
This pandemic is showing how interconnected and interdependent we all are. And one HCL is showing how one person and many of us can make a difference.
It's a feeling of togetherness, brotherhood, stepping up to the occasion and standing for those who are in need and need support from us.
One HCL is about staying inspired and increased motivation while adjusting to the new normal.
We stand together as HCLites, and not just for the fellow HCLites, but also for our community, also for our nation.
As we work through these uncertain times of COVID-19, I take pride in the fact that I work for an organization who makes it clear that its priorities are its people, its clients, and then being a good global citizen. And HCL really, with one HCL, encapsulates all of this.
And we're coming out stronger as true communities. One HCL means we are all in this together.
We are one HCL, divided by geographies, but united by networking. We cope with COVID-19 efficiently and build our team and start working from home.
Showing all the stories of our HCL employees who have come an extra mile to support their projects, to support their teams, and to support the society. Really hats off to all of them, and really thanks to HCL for bringing all the stories into the limelight, so that these stories will inspire others, and they'll make many more champions.